Were you gonna have?
Terrific. Okay, thank you very much for joining us on the La Plata Electric Association board meeting for December 15th, the last board meeting of the year. We'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order, and as we've done in the past, we'd like to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So wherever you are, if you don't mind standing and joining us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it
stands
one
one nation
under
under God,
indivisible, with
liberty
and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. Let's start with the approval of agenda. I need a motion, please.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Second.
Second by Kohler.
There you go. All in favor? Aye.
I think we were going to need to make a couple of adjustments to that, John. So,
okay, sorry. All right, hands down. Go ahead,
yes.
Graham.
So I think we needed to add a line item to executive session to discuss some cybersecurity matters, and we need to remove the attorney update because our FERC counsel is not available. Correct, Jessica?
Terrific.
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to modify that proposal to approve the agenda with the modifications recommended and as articulated by Graham.
Yes.
Great, thank you, John. Second, I saw Ted stand up first. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There we go.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
All opposed, all abstained. Thank you. Okay, so before we go on, I think I just wanted to take a moment to call out. So we are, as everybody pretty much in the region knows, we are sort of having a significant storm right now that is impacting quite a few members. So for the people that are watching at home, I'd like to just sort of call out and let all the people on this call today, if you need to step away from this meeting for any reason whatsoever as it relates to our members are the most important thing. And so if you're getting calls from members or they need assistance, certainly any of the staff needs to step away for any reason, please just step away. You don't need to hold your hand up or wait for a natural break. And we will deal with member issues related to the storm on a priority basis. And maybe if we could ask Jessica, could you give us, just so for context, we all have a quick update on sort of where we are with outages and storm stuff as it exists right now?
Yeah, sure. So I think most people were getting the outage text that really started about 3:19 a.m. this morning. I'm sure many of you were woken by the winds. Looks like the highest number of outages was about 3,700. We are down to 714 people out. We have a lot of broken poles, so I think that's kind of the major issue. Garrett is not on, as you can tell, because we spoke this morning and they have a significant number of those outages in the Pagosa area. And so they're dealing with some broken poles and trying to get folks back in power. And then just looking at the map, take a look at the outage map, because those are really the areas that are out, at least on the western side of our service territory. It's really up in the Purgatory area. So feel bad for those skiers. I don't know, Jerry, are the lifts running? And then it looks like Lemon Reservoir. So, but as you can see, the outages continue to decrease over time. But as we experienced the last storm, they decreased and then they And then they increased when the melting happened because the snow fell off the lines and it snapped the lines together. And so Hillary and Jerry and the team did a really good job of actually posting a video of a lineman tapping the line, and you can see what it did. It bounced it back. So I would encourage people, if you're on LinkedIn, to check out that video. And then Jerry just let me know that San Luis Valley lost dozens of transmission structures. So that is not good at all. So that they were hit harder. So that's the update. And you see Jerry here, but he will likely be in and out. And I'm not sure if Garrett will be able to join us. And I know Hillary will probably have to pop out, and maybe Dan, if we have some communication broadband issues or other transmission distribution problems. So thank you for everyone's good wishes and patience.
Terrific. Thanks for the update. Well, you know, outages are a downer, but at least we're having outages because of snow and storms, as opposed to California, which has it because of financial mismanagement. But I digress. Let's go ahead and open the floor for member comments and concerns. Hillary, do we have people in attendance today?
We have one. This is Janelle.
Oh, thank you, Janelle. Sorry.
You're welcome. It's okay.
That's fine. I'm happy to 100. It's fine.
Yep.
Okay. Terrific. Then it appears there's no member comments. So let's move on. Item 3, the consent board items. Again, as we've done in the past, is take a moment here. If anybody wants to call out any particular items, they just have to request it removed from the consent item, and we'll deal with that item separately. But otherwise, we'll do it as a package. So does anybody have any things they want removed? Rachel, please go ahead.
Yeah, if I could pull out the director expense report.
Terrific. Absolutely. Anybody else? Tim, go ahead.
I didn't see any in my my package. Any director travel requests? Does that mean there were none, or is it just missing?
Did anybody have a travel request? Okay, then that appears it was not an error.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then we'll need a motion to approve the consent board items with the exception of the item F, director expense approval, which we'll handle separately. Go ahead. Sorry, Kohler, did you have a comment before we make that request?
No, I was going to make the motion to
Terrific.
approve it.
Terrific. Thank you. Can we get a second?
Rachel seconds.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, all in favor? The hand up, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained? Okay, thank you very much. All right, so turning to the director expense approval, I think, Rachel, you had a comment to start with. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, there's just a little bit of an autofill situation with the Excel spreadsheet. So I move that we approve director expenses minus the 125 per diem line item for me on date 12/13/21.
Okay, did everybody saw there was an email floating around on why she's pulling that out? Do we need public context on that, or is everybody clear on that?
I'll second.
Okay, John, seconding. Okay, great. All in favor of approving the expense report, except for the item identified by Rachel Landis? Hold your hand up, say aye.
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 All opposed? All abstained? Okay, thank you.
John,
motion
can
passed.
can Graham just clarify a point on that though, so that
Go ahead.
so that board members are clear on what they need to report, not report?
Yeah,
Yeah.
please do.
Yeah, so the bylaws, allow directors to claim for official meetings of the cooperative. If you're at a mandatory meeting of cooperative time, but if you're just sort of having a one-on-one meeting with another director or something that's sort of not a mandatory meeting, that's not sort of covered. And I think that's what we're dealing with here, right? Is to sort of interlineate that inadvertent claim for a meeting. So
Right. So Graham, just to clarify, in this instance, people don't need a claim when they have a one-on-one with me.
no, yeah.
So Rachel, you didn't have to actually claim that on the.
I didn't claim it for reimbursement. I just wrote down that it happened and then
Yeah.
accidentally. So we don't need to write even
No.
document those things
No.
happen.
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is just for official meetings.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Graham. Kirsten, you had a comment, please go ahead.
Yeah, same topic. It's more the function of it. So it sounds like Janelle has something in place that if somebody puts in for a meeting, and I'm talking about official ones, I don't always, depending upon the length of the meeting, I don't always claim my per diem, and it'll be 0 on my thing, but I want to make sure that doesn't automatically happen, because I don't want to have to double check every time that I don't claim something that it accidentally gets claimed.
Okay.
Janelle, is there an automatic thing that's happening that I need to be aware of? And
No, just seconding what Graham's saying. If we don't need to even put it to get reimbursed, then let's not even put it on the expense sheets or report. Yeah, you do add stuff,
no,
Kirsten,
that's
that
not what
doesn't.
Graham said. Graham said if it's not an official meeting, you don't have to put it on. I'm talking about official meetings that do need to be reported.
If it's outside of FAC or COP, which has their own sign-in sheets, then yes, you would need to add it.
Okay, so for instance, there were multiple at-large meetings or whatever those were called, town halls. And I attended both. I put in for both, but of course I didn't claim for both. I don't remember if I claimed for either. So it's important for me to put it in, but it's also important that I not get paid. So I just want to make sure that there's some eyes on not being on if somebody doesn't want to get paid their per diem for whatever bloody reason, that they don't.
Yeah, if it doesn't have an item with money on it, I'm not going to add it. So.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
Well, except for that Rachel's item didn't have money on it.
Right, and it was a copy and paste, and it populated on that expense sheet that's on Google Drives that says executive use only. So when I copied hers over, it added it. So I think that's where Graham's saying don't even add it. Is that true, Graham? Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, there's no need to report that type of meeting at all. It's only sort of official noticed meetings.
I'm talking about official notice meetings.
Yeah, and so but I think it sounds to me more like your question is for Janelle about the mechanics of how does that get tracked over into the reimbursement request, right?
That is absolutely correct. That is my question. And I think I got 2 answers. One is that it doesn't happen automatically. And then another one was that it does happen when it's a cut and paste. So I just want to make sure that whatever it is doesn't happen again. Janelle, I appreciate that.
Would it help if we sent a clarifying email, Kirsten? So maybe I can work with Janelle and Graham and we can circle back and send an email. Would that be okay?
Well, email yes or no. I just want to make sure that the process is correct.
Yeah, and I think it would help staff if we could circle back and get back to you.
Super. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Rachel, go ahead, please.
And that was just going to be a request I would have, since it's on an Excel sheet. Can you make one tab the instructions tab for how you want those sheets filled out, what it includes, what it doesn't include, and then the other tab is the actual form, and that way people like me who seem to get confused all the time about this know the letter of the law, we can avoid this. And then also when new members come on, we don't have to remember to send them the whole email, and it's there every time.
Good suggestion. Okay. Thank you. Tim, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, these might all be clarifying questions, but I think ultimately it's up to each of us as board members to be certain that we submit proper expense reports and that they're recorded correctly. I'm not sure we can push that on to Janelle or anybody else. That's our own responsibility. If you don't think it's right, you should correct it, like Rachel's trying to do here, right? So let's not
Just give a fart.
be unclear about our responsibility.
Okay, so if we put it in correctly and it gets done incorrectly, it's my responsibility to make sure it gets entered correctly. It would be helpful if it does get entered correctly.
Right. And yeah, they're good instructions. We did change that a few months ago. The template, with instructions on how to use it and so forth. So maybe they need to be improved, but I think we take responsibility for our own submission of expenses.
Good point. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's push on here. All right. So we're on item 4, CEO and staff reports. Let's go ahead and let her rip.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, and I apologize. It's not. I have too much open, I think. I have to close down.
You want me to share? I've got it.
Yeah,
open.
can you do that?
Yep.
I'm not sure why it's not finding it.
Maybe it's because it's as sleepy as you sound. You sound like you've been up since-
Sorry. I've been up since 3.
Yeah.
I cannot, when these things start pinging, I just worry. Okay. Okay, so we will go through the dashboard. These are some fun pictures of the food drive at Safeway. Sent you all out a note about how successful that was. So thank you for participating. It's always great when the board joins our healthy competition in our office to give back to people. So, all right, Drew, go ahead. So a little on the key performance. We have 2 monitoring performance items, which is cash reserves and equity. Everything else is green check, which is great. I will defer the comments about cash reserves and equity to when Carl discusses the financials after me. Did you have a question, Kirsten?
It's a quick one. Under finance, it says that the finance is from October, but all our financial reports are from November. So wondering why this didn't have a chance to get caught up.
Sure. Yeah. And by the way, I did want to say, Kirsten, thanks for your emails on the questions. We were going to hope to answer those through the course of the presentation. So appreciate that. Carl, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Excuse me. For this presentation, Hillary's team work on it, and they need quite a lot of time to put it together. So the deadline for me getting the financial KPIs was the 8th. We didn't actually get a bill from Tri-State till the 9th, which is not late. That's perfectly normal. And then we had financials on the 10th, and then I think you guys received them on the 11th after we'd reviewed. So it's purely that although they're done now, when this report was put together, November financials were not available.
Okay, so when we're kind of early in the month, depending upon how the Wednesdays lie, we may expect to see this again. I super appreciate that the note is there. Now I understand why. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good, thank you. Okay, Drew? So we'll go into November. Okay, good news, accidents and incidents are 0. So that's great. We are going down in COVID, so 3 cases in November. Spoiler alert, no cases in December so far, thankfully. So that's great news. A couple things on my report. I'm just going to highlight. Please feel free to ask questions. But I was asked to do a STEM curriculum development 9R meeting, which was fantastic. It was great that the new 9R superintendent is asking folks in our area, business leaders, owners, what kind of students or what kind of employees we're hiring. So that was a really good opportunity to get together and talk through things. And we'll probably get more involved in the school districts in our La Plata and Archuleta in regards to having even linemen go to some of the high schools to talk about the trades. We're really excited about that. And then also some of the other college education folks that are working for La Plata going and just giving them ideas about STEM education. So that's a nice partnership with the school district. Holly, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just really appreciate all the STEM curriculum development and the community education pieces. And I really like you're working with the 9R school district and their interest. That's really like innovative on their end to really go out to the community and ask like that. I do know that Archuleta County has a really great CTE program that is being put together right now. And so they're in the middle of a fundraising drive, and that's a whole nother story, but they are really looking at these types of things. So they would be a great contact for you to possibly approach with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, Holly, do you mind getting me in touch with them? Because I am not in touch with that group. That would be really helpful.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Jessica, I'm the president of the school board.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Well, Bob, maybe you and I can touch base
yeah,
afterwards.
I made a note myself to reach out to you. So yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be wonderful. Okay. Thank you. All right.
Mhm.
Sue, did you have a question on the last slide?
I do. On the Economic Development Alliance, can you expound on that a little bit and let us know kind of what that is and who all is involved in that? Is that a local group?
Yeah, it's a local group run by Mike French, and they've been around for a long time. So they have investor meetings once a month that you can sign up for. And they asked if I would come and present at the last meeting in November. So it was an update on the 3-pronged strategy. And it's business leaders and it's a whole host of folks, but it's open to folks that are members. Okay. All right, a few things on here were exciting. Well, all of them we're excited about, but the Pagosa project was a really big one and it spanned a couple months. And unfortunately, Garrett's not on today, but their crews did a fantastic job. They were on time, under budget, and got the work done. So that's really great news. And then the Hillcrest was an emergency replacement, but that was done very quickly as well. So those are some of the big items that were happening in November. Okay, next slide. This one, again, Fill the Bucket food drive. Again, thank you. I'm not exactly sure. Hillary, did you have an update on how we did compared to previous years on those numbers?
Yeah, we were a couple 100 pounds less than last year, but we were also about double the cash that we collected. So kind of balanced out.
That's great. So thank you, Hillary. And then on the Giving Tree, Tim, thanks for sending out that note. We're still collecting donations to help our members through this difficult time. So that was a great mention too and a great effort. Okay, Drew? Of course, the Capital Credit Deep Dive is later this afternoon. We're excited about that. We've been spending a lot of time researching broadband practices, best practices, speaking with our neighbors. So that's been a big emphasis in November. And then the Animus View pilot project, which you are all familiar with. We've sent you guys a press releases on that. So we're really gearing up with that with NRECA and Tri-State and Four Core. And so we're really excited about that project. Really looking forward to the data that we're going to collect from that as well. Okay. And those were the highlights. So we're open for questions. And Drew, you can probably stop sharing now. Thank you.
Terrific. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I was just curious if, while it's still fresh in the mind from that broadband gathering, what were some of the takeaways you all had?
Yeah, it's a good question, Rachel. I think it's that we need a central coordinator. There's a lot going on, and it's clear that we need somebody that's going to be actively working to bring all of the different groups together and help us apply for grants, because there's billions of dollars being released by the infrastructure bill, and we really need a regional coordinator. So unfortunately, Miriam has left Southwest COG. She got a great opportunity to work in broadband for a national consulting firm, so it's good for her. But we are now trying to figure out who will help stitch this together for us. So we're actively working with the counties and Region 9 to try to figure out who's going to take on that role. So we've have not identified one person. It's more like two people. So we're working on that issue. But that's really the main issue, is figuring out how do we make sure we're not duplicating efforts. And when the grant applications come out, that we join together to get the money.
Is that like a new position that could be created, say using ARPA funds with 3-year short term?
Yeah, I actually, before Miriam left, she went out for a grant to help to actually pay for an FTE to do this. So she'll keep her finger on the pulse and keep us updated on that. Good question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Kohler, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I received an email yesterday from the San Juan Basin Health, and they were talking about working on an evacuation shelter training. And this is in plans of long-term power outages this winter. And I don't know, are we involved with that group? They're talking about collaborative opportunities. So just wondered if LPEA was involved with that planning.
And I'm looking for Jerry, but he may be out. So Kohler, we'll have to get back to you on that, unless Dan knows. Dan,
Okay.
you unmuted.
I was just going to say, historically, I haven't been in touch, heard on this recent effort here, but like when we've done, planning sessions and everything, we've all gone up to the EOC and go through the whole thing. So we can catch up with Jerry here later and see what's going on currently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, go ahead.
All right, this one's just a quick clarifier. On page 30, the legal proceedings, attend several FERC proceedings on the BDP/CDP case and on the new CTP case at FERC. Is that latter referring to United, or is there something else happening that's new?
I think she froze. Let's give her.
Yeah, Rachel, I think we'll cover that when we get. I think it might be better to cover that when we get to the legal parts of the agenda.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Actually, can you guys just stand by? I'm going to send Jessica a text. I'm not sure she may not know she's frozen. Oh, she said, I did get a text from her. She said her power just went out. All right, so
Flying blind.
yeah. All right, so no one is immune. Let's continue the meeting, and then if we have issues that only she can address, we'll just defer them until hopefully she either gets to a place where her power is available. Kohler, go ahead, did you please?
Yeah, I just have a question since Jessica got bumped off, because it could easily happen to me here where the power goes out. Is there a phone number we can call to join the meeting without having power?
Yeah.
Cell phone number? And if so, could you share that?
It should be in the meeting dial in.
Yeah,
Kohler, okay, so I did see those numbers, and those are legitimate numbers. We can just call. And okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Make
so there's
the
the bottom of the
donation to
invite.
my fund, but
Exactly. Push 1 to give money. Okay. Onward. So I think we're going to do number 2. Excuse me. We're on item 4B, financial report. So Carl, I think you're up.
Oh, there's Jessica as well. So it's all coming together. Okay, I will share my screen.
While you're doing that, I apologize. My power went out. So now it's back on.
I communicated that.
right,
so
thank you.
we were just saying, if anybody loses power, to use the dial-in numbers on the Zoom if your phone is still available. All right, Carl, rock and roll.
Thanks, John. So November financials. Although the October KPIs were on that front sheet, November's were pretty much the same. So we didn't lose much in terms of what we're showing. So let's focus first of all on where we don't have the green check mark. Cash reserves were around 13% of operating costs at the end of November. They are around 16.5 today, so that's good news. Kirsten asked a question because I mentioned that capital credit retirements was still the main factor in why reserves were down. And she asked, well, don't you issue all the checks at once? And mostly we do. Some of our bigger members do go out on a slightly different timetable. And those are the ones that obviously affect the reserves the most. And the other part is, which I apologize because it wasn't altogether clear in my commentary, was that a lot of our capital credit retirements are actually bill credits. So although individually they're small, they add up. And as time goes on and there are various bill cycles, we just collect slightly less money for a few weeks as those bill credits are realized. So that's why we were at that fairly low cash reserve number at the end of November. As I mentioned, we have bounced back to the 16% range, and I am confident that we will be at that range at the end of the year. So my orange check mark there, first of all, I was very happy to find that online. So it kind of matched my green ones. It's not quite the same, but it's pretty good. The reason I've put that as a check mark still, although it's orange, because we do want to highlight that it does not fall into our range, is the reason that we have equity that's higher than that range is because the margins are higher. As you generate margins throughout the year, that becomes part of your equity. So the reason we're above the 50 is because our margins are 4% of revenues rather than 1%. So where I would put a red cross is if the other reason you can have your equity percentage be too high is because you haven't retired any. So every time you make a retirement, your equity percentage should decrease. But because even though our retirement this year was the highest we've ever done at over around $5.5 million, our margins are around 4 or 5 million as well. So they've canceled each other out, if that makes sense. So that's the reason where we thought we'd go from 52 at the beginning of the year down to around 50. That just hasn't happened because margins have offset the retirement, that very substantial retirement. So we, in the FAC, we have agreed, I think in March, as I recall, that's when we're going to re-examine the ranges. And I think maybe 45 to 55 is what we should go for. But when we get into the capital credit presentation, we can dive into that a little deeper. Everything else is obviously well within range or over the goal specified. So looking at some of our highlights, these are probably becoming very familiar to you because they don't change a whole heck of a lot month in, month out. I know when I spoke to the FAC last week before we had the results, I thought we'd be somewhat similar to October, and we were almost identical. So it's quite comforting that, you know, you've got that feel, and it turns out to be pretty much right. So that was good. So costs over $2 million below forecasts. Labor, we've pretty much spot on. I can tell you that December will not be, because you had guys working and working and working on those outages, and no doubt that's happening again today. So we're going to see some pretty significant overtime next month, but that's unavoidable, and I'd prefer to be over budget than leave our members out of power for sure. Delinquent accounts still very, very low, which is good news. And electric sales continue to be below forecast. What was a little different in November was that residential sales were also below forecast, which is not something we've seen much of, but it seems kind of odd when we're sitting here shivering and looking at the snow. But if you recall, November was pretty unseasonably warm, and we didn't see the usage that we anticipated. Our gross margin, that's our revenue less cost of power, is $1.1 million above forecast, and that's, you know, we're obviously not selling the kilowatt hours, so the main factor there is that, you know, that rate decrease from Tri-State, which obviously we passed on to the members through the capital credit retirement in the summer. And if we look at our bottom line operating margin, we're around $3.2 million over forecast. So if we hit forecast exactly for December, we're going to be somewhere around 3.5 million over forecast, I think. But I just don't see that happening with the overtime expenditure and so forth. So that probably should come down to around 3 million, I would think, by the time we get to the end of the year, which is still obviously a very good result. And that's all I've got for you for November. It's I think we'll have more to talk about next month, but any questions?
Go ahead, Sue. I'm sorry, Sue, you're up.
All right, thank you. On page 49, Carl, it talks about the abandoned projects that were written off. Can you give us some examples of those abandoned projects and what those include?
I would have to get back to you on that exactly, Sue, because there's a lot. There's not one big one in particular. It was a very thorough review that we had hoped to do earlier. That was our dear friend Brandy. That was her responsibility, and obviously she was not able to do it. So I will have to get back to you on that one, Sue. But there's not one big one.
All right, thank you.
Terrific. Kohler, go ahead.
Are you taking questions on the financials now?
Yes.
Yes.
So I have it on page 52 of 112, and it's the glossary of terms.
Mm-hmm.
Down about halfway through the page, it has the non-operating margins. And at the very end of that line, it talks about the PPP funding in 2020. So keeping that in mind, and then going to the next page, 53 out of 112, where we have the non-operating margins for 2020 or 2021, I'm not really seeing that PPP, because wasn't that around $2 million? And where does that show up?
That would be on that line, Kohler, but that was recorded in December, so that's why you can't see it right now. So what we're doing year to date 2020, so it's not there yet.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Hey, Carl, on that page 53, there's some notation numbers in between the operation maintenance expense forecast for November 21 and another one down below. Is that just, I'm not sure what those are. One's 121,423 below the total operation.
Oh, yeah, you're right, Tim. There's some, that shouldn't be there. Apologies.
All right. I just wasn't sure if you were trying to tell us something or not.
It's a coded plea for help. No, those should not be there. Thank you.
I think I had one other question here. Yeah, on page 55.
Yep.
The below the operating margins, income loss from equity investments, which is fast track, I believe.
Yep.
The percentage decrease is 0, even though there was like a $60,000 change. So I'm just, I always look at these percentages to give me an idea of what else I need to look at. So
yeah, that shouldn't be there. Thank you, Tim.
I'm not trying to point out.
No, I like these to be perfect, so I'm annoyed that I've missed something. So thank you for bringing that up.
I appreciate it. I don't think I have anything else. I looked at everything else. Thanks very much.
Terrific. Thank you. Rachel, go ahead, please.
Let's see, am I frozen now?
Nope.
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay. Just want to say thank you so much for the glossary of terms on page 52. I know we've been talking about that for a while, and it's awesome. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Holly, go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. So you already asked the question that I was going to ask about what other deductions there might be. And thank you for that glossary of terms, just as Rachel mentioned. I also noted in the conclusion, I have to say that your summary page, Carl, is always a joy to read. And I really enjoy how it outlines everything and it explains everything. And really, I get a whole lot from it. But in that last paragraph, it talks about the promotions that are happening within the company. And I noticed that on not only your report, but on a couple of other reports in different little pieces. And I just want to acknowledge that and say kudos to those staff members and to you guys for doing that, because I really do think that it increases employee morale and it strengthens those folks, and it really just is good for the fabric of the company. So thank you for that. Kudos, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, other comments for Carl before we go into capital credit review? Go ahead, Kohler. Thank you.
Just another real quick thank you. I really appreciate you combining the financials with the finance report. That I really find helpful. So thank you for doing that.
Terrific.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Last call for Carl, although I think you get to keep going on capital credit. Okay, so let's move on to capital credit review. Who is going to lead this one?
That's me.
Excellent. That's what I thought.
Okay. All righty. So let's get into what we're going to talk about here. So I'm going to get into some of the real basics, just to, which I'm sure for a number of you know this stuff, but I don't think it does any harm to have a refresher. And for some of the newer board members, I think it'll be helpful. So we're going to define what credits, allocations, retirements. Explain the process by which the cash that we allocate is then retired to the members, look at some of the history of what we've done in the past, and also what Tri-State has done in the past in terms of what they've allocated to us and retired to us. Then we're going to talk about what's in our 2022 budget for capital credit retirement plans and possibly what might happen after that. So first of all, got a definitions page just for some of the more technical accounting terms. So I want to just make sure we understand FIFO and LIFO. Really, FIFO just means that what you're going to retire or pay out to the members are the oldest allocations. It's the stuff, when we look at the graphs, well, this will be clearer, but the stuff that we allocated around 2000 is kind of what we're looking at right now, 2000, 2001. Those are retired first. LIFO means that the newest allocations are paid out to the members, and we've done some small ones of these in the last year and a half. The one we did in the summer was to benefit the current membership. So it made sense that you go to the newest allocation, because those members that were members in 2020 are more likely to still be members in 2021, obviously. So another thing, when we talk about patronage capital, it really just means total capital credits. It's the whole bucket. Working capital, this is just an accounting term for this. These are your debtors, creditors, your inventories, and your cash. This is the things that you are using in your day-to-day management of the business. Operating margins, we talk about every month. This is our kind of bottom line from our sales of electricity minus the cost of providing that service. Non-operating margins, everything else. So what is a G&T allocation? Those are capital. When we kind of flip the script here, this is where we are the member and Tri-State is the big co-op. And as a member of Tri-State, they allocate their margins to us just as we allocate to our members. And they also retire to us annually. So with those out of the way, let's go to my fantastic artwork. Very pleased with my pig. What are allocations and retirements? So as you know, each month we look at our finances, and at the end of December, we do a more detailed report that we call a Form 7. And we also have our audited financial statements where BKD will come in, look at our results, sign off on them. And once we've done that, we have a kind of final number. This is our bottom line. If we were a normal trading business for profit, we'd say this is our profit. And what you would do is then, how much of that are we going to pay out as a dividend to our members? Dividend to our shareholders, rather. So that's very much what we do. We say, okay, this is our profit, and we're going to allocate that to our membership. And per policy 205, this is we allocate our operating revenues one way, which is on dollars spent, and our non-operating margins on kilowatt hours used. Slight difference, but operating margin allocation favors residential users, and the non-operating is more favorable to industrial users. That was no doubt set up that way for a reason. I'm not entirely sure what that reason is, but that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of our policies and bylaws. So when those margins are allocated, this isn't a question of any cash changing hands. What we're saying is, for each member, we're going to start building up your patronage capital, what I'd call a savings account, which is why we're using the piggy bank as a kind of metaphor for that. So each member, every year, the member who was active in that year will receive an allocation that goes into their piggy bank, and their account builds up each year that they are a member using electric service for in LPEA. Now, it's also, you could regard the piggy bank as LPEA's savings account to a degree, in that capital we use that provides working capital for the co-op. So in the same way a for-profit business has share capital, and they can use that to finance their working capital, debtors, creditors, inventory, and so forth. This is kind of the purpose of the members' patronage capital, which is why you don't give it back straight away. You keep it for a term, which for us is around 20 years, so that we have capital to keep the business going that isn't exclusively debt capital, because obviously debt capital comes with an interest cost. So I will go through retirements, and I can see I've got one hand up at the moment, and then I'll pause for some questions. So retirement is where the member gets to pull out from their piggy bank. They don't make that decision. They don't say, well, I'd like some money now, so please give it to me. That withdrawal is completely at the discretion of the board. So you could, as a board, decide for years and years and years that you don't want to retire anything. Not a good idea. Obviously, the members would not be happy. And there have been some co-ops in the United States who have been very lax in their retirements and have been taken to court by their members, and they've lost. So to keep the general guidance that I got when attending the cooperative finance professional training certificate course was that 30 years is the absolute maximum that you should go for a distribution co-op. Now, we are well below that, but that's kind of it's not set in stone, it's not in our policies, but we certainly should not get to a point where we've got patronage capital older than 30 years outstanding. So just to bear that in mind. So when we pay back the capital credits to the members or retire them, they either get a bill credit or a check, depending on how much money it is. And as I mentioned before, that retirement is at your discretion as a board. As you recall, I make a recommendation, but you're perfectly within your rights to go, that's stupid, Carl, we're not doing that. So that's how a retirement happens. You kind of, in very simple terms, you have to allocate when we get to the year end per our policies and bylaws. We do have to allocate, but retirement is at your discretion. So there, I'll pause, and I'll stop sharing the screen just for a minute so I can see how many hands I've got up. I can see I've got one so far.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Okay, I'm that one. I'll go ahead and ask my question if I may.
Not anymore, you're not, but go ahead.
Okay, I thought maybe I'll shut up until I'm called on.
No, I'm sorry. I was saying you're not the only person with questions. You are called on. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Carl, would you please repeat to me what you said about the operating the allocations which favor residential versus which favor industrials? Could you just repeat that a little slower for me?
Sure. So the operating margins are allocated based on the dollars you spend, and non-operating margins are allocated on the kilowatt hours you use. So for the standard residential member is paying more per kilowatt hour than an industrial member. So in terms of proportions, they are favored by it being counted on dollars rather than kilowatt hours. So a operating margin would favor a residential user, and a non-operating margin would favor someone using the most kilowatt hours, even if they're paying less for them.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Joe?
Yeah, I've always been a little confused about the FIFO and LIFO. Is that, for lack of better terms, is that kind of a political decision on the board to say we're going to reward FIFO over LIFO and vice versa?
I wouldn't really call it political. I mean, maybe you could, but I think the reason we did the first LIFO one, you know, at the height of the first COVID lockdown, was we knew our members were hurting and we wanted to get money to our current members rather than people who may have long left the service territory. I guess you could call that political, but I think I think it just made sense in that climate. And then when we did the 1.5 million, I think that just made sense because it was the current members who should benefit from a rate reduction in 2021.
Okay, so that's always up to basically board discretion on recommendation from staff.
Yeah, I'll make a recommendation, but if you don't like it, then, and I know the last one we did all FIFO because that was kind of more, let's get some of this old stuff out of the way because we don't want to get it. I mean, it was by no means 30 years old, but it was older than I would have liked.
Great, thanks.
Okay. All right, let's, I don't see any other hands, so I will keep going. Okay. Everyone see that? Okay. Great. Okay, so when and how are capital credits allocated to the members? So as I mentioned, policy 205, I do manage to remember that one, but I just have to say bylaws for the other one because I forget Article 7, Section 3. But they do establish the process for the allocation of capital credits. So when does this happen? Capital credits are, as we mentioned, we do the allocation after we have like complete finality on our previous year's results, and that will be after the auditors have delivered their report to you as a board, and we've filed Form 7, which is our kind of specific electric co-op financial report with CFC, which is typically at the April board meeting that would be done, where the auditors would give their report, and then we are ready to allocate, and we would typically pass that motion in May. So what do we allocate? So in very simple terms, we allocate everything in terms of all of our income less all of our expenses. As we kind of touched on, and Kirsten's question covered this nicely, the operating margins and the non-operating margins are allocated slightly differently, but they're all allocated. So it really is your bottom line is allocated to the membership and forms part of their allocation savings account. So here's a history of what we have allocated over, well, since the year 2000, and obviously we don't have 2021 because it's not finished yet. And the green bar is what we call the co-op allocation, and the blue bar is the G&T allocation. So we touched on this briefly when we looked at the definitions, but the G&T allocation is the right. Let's not say allocation too many times. As a member of Tri-State, they will allocate an amount to us, which is our share as a, at the moment, full services member of Tri-State of their margin. That is one line in our income statement. If you look at the glossary of terms, you'll see you've got a G&T, I think it's generation and transmission capital credits as a line on our income statement. That is the only thing that is in that blue line. You can see around the mid 2000s, they were allocating an awful lot of, they were making very big allocations to us. So, but you will also see in the early 2000s, there was actually none. But that is, this is where we get into some somewhat technical territory, but I do want to explain it to you. That doesn't mean that Tri-State didn't allocate anything to us in 2000 or 2001 or 2002 or 2003. But we had other non-operating losses, which I believe were from a subsidiary company at that time, that more than kind of swallowed up our G&T allocation, so that the way our allocation bylaws and policies work is if we actually have zero non-operating margins or a negative non-operating margin, which is actually what happened in those years, we do not allocate the G&T credit to the members. I'm very hopeful we never have to do that again, because that would be a signal that we have invested in a company that's, you know, lost us a ton of money. So we do not want to do that again. But that's why you see that somewhat odd position in the early 2000s. If we go up to kind of more recent times, oh, I'm sorry. You'll see that 2020, we have a very nicely sized green bar from our co-op allocation. Now, this is our operating margin plus our non-operating margins that were not Tri-State. So that 2021 is somewhat inflated by that PPP loan, as we talked about. But if we think of where we're going to land for 2021, the green bar will probably be around 4 million-ish. And this blue bar, I would anticipate would be somewhat similar. We did not get a large allocation from Tri-State in 2020. And I would anticipate that we'll get something similar in 2021, looking at their results so far. 18 and 19, you can see they were reasonably similar. So 2021, that bar, I think, will look, the green will be slightly less because there won't be a PPP loan in there, and the blue will be very similar. So I want to pause there because there's a lot to take in on this slide, and I can see I've got at least a couple of questions. I'd like to keep the slide up though, so if I miss a hand, please let me know.
Great. Go ahead, Tim.
Hey, thanks, Carl. This is really helpful information. Quick question is, what's the basis of Tri-State allocation? Is it, and has it changed at all? Is it purely operating margin, or is it also kilowatt hour or anything like that? That we do it two different ways. Do they do it one of those ways consistently over the years, or what?
I don't know about recent any changes kind of prior to my tenure. I would certainly look into it. I'm sure Pat would be happy to let me know. But that I believe they allocate very similarly to us in that they'll do operating margin on dollars and non-operating on kilowatt hours. But I will confirm that with Pat and send out a brief note once he lets me know.
All right, thanks. And one other comment is, this is really good stuff. I think it would be really helpful if it's available somewhere for members to review, as well, or on the website or something. It's a great explanation of what's happening here. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Kirsten.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Love this stuff. For the allocations on this slide, you mentioned that there weren't any, or that we didn't allocate any of the G&T in 2000, the early knots. And this year, and I know this is about retirements, but in the report from Kohler this week, we got that they are retiring $10 million. So that's going to start chipping away at that blue. And it says it's for the year 2004. So that's perfect, because we're going to be paying out we're going to be retiring 2004 allocations, and we actually have allocations to retire. But it looks like it's only about $2 million. And if it's 10 million for the whole tri-state, we're only going to be getting what, 500,000. So that means that I think we will be retiring our also 2004 G&T allocations, just to kind of keep it on track with what they're retiring to us.
We actually won't be. We've still got some older stuff, G&T stuff, that we'll retire first. If you don't mind, Kristen, when I get to that G&T specific slide, we can go over that. But the current budget is to retire. We've still got some 98 and 99 stuff outstanding.
Oh, okay, so this chart just doesn't. Well, you just don't see it because it's not showing.
Right.
Up.
Yeah.
I got it. You didn't go that far. Okay.
But we will actually get just over $1 million from their 10 million retirement.
Yeah, bad napkin math on my part.
But it's something to do with a lot of the members weren't members in 2004. I think the New Mexico guys weren't eligible for a retirement. So it's really pretty much split amongst Colorado and Nebraska, Wyoming.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, just so I'm clear on the charts. So for 2020, it looks like Tri-State's allocation was like $1.5 million.
Yeah, more or less.
Allocation was like $6.5 million, but it all counts for LPEA's allocation.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Not an accounting guy, so thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Great. Okay, back to you.
Thanks, John. So this is when and how are the capital credits retired, and we've kind of touched on a lot of this. Once again, 205 and Article 7, Section 3 are the policy and bylaws that we are looking at, and when is, they can be retired or paid back to the members. We can do that whenever we want, and we kind of usually do it around the same time as we did. We do something like late fall, but as you saw in this year, if you want to do it some other time, you can, and we did. We did the $1.5 million LIFO retirement in the summer. So if we were so inclined, we could do a retirement every week. I certainly wouldn't recommend it, but it is something you can do. There is a whole lot more flexibility with retirement than there is with allocation. So, and once again, what do you retire? It's entirely up to you as a board. I will make a recommendation, but you can reject that. When I make my recommendation, I will do it based on, you know, the financial situation of the co-op. But we had a very good example of, you know, how that can play out with Tri-State's current retirement. Pat and his team kind of came to their FAC, said, we think we could retire 30 million. And it was rejected. They said that, I think that's too much. I don't want to borrow money to pay out capital credits, and reduced it to 10. That's obviously something we could do if we, you know, next year, if something goes wrong and I say, yeah, let's retire 5 million. You go, well, you've only got $1 million in cash. I think that's a really bad idea. Then obviously that's what we should do. So once again, we've got a nice little chart here. This is our history of our retirements, once again from 2000 onwards. Now, you'll see the red bar. I'm going to kind of ignore those early noughts just for a moment. Those red bars look pretty consistent from 2004, pretty much up to, yeah, it's just very consistent. That's kind of what we did for a long time. Now I will now zero in on those early noughts. There was a retirement in 2000, looks like just under 2 million. But obviously there were some difficult financial years in those early noughts, as we touched on, where there's those zero allocations. So nothing was retired in 2001, 2002, 2003. But the one that I found the most interesting, obviously with a relatively brief tenure at the co-op, you know, I'm just coming up to a couple of years now, was how few G&T retirements we've actually done. I know in 2019, before I came on board, we decided not to retire any. That wasn't well received in some quarters, but it was done because just our position that year, we had margins which were close to zero. I know they kind of, we got something in the last quarter that meant we did have a positive margin. So the decision was made that we're not going to retire G&T capital credits in 2019, and we're going to try and build up the rate stabilization reserve so that we are better prepared for an emergency. In 2020, lo and behold, an emergency came. And once again, we didn't retire the G&T capital credits, but we were also able to use our rate stabilization fund to offset the deferred rate increase. So those two, that's why you got nothing in green. But there had actually only been G&T retirements for 5 years before that. And prior to that, nothing. So the reason, you know, what Kirsten touched on with, are you going to do 2004 this year? No, probably not. I'm looking at doing 98 and 99, is we just didn't retire any of these G&T allocations until 2014. I think in 2017 and 18, I'm not entirely sure prior to that, but pretty much what we did is we got a retirement from Tri-State, and then we retired the same amount to the members. Obviously 19 and 20, we didn't do that. And 2021, you can see obviously that huge green block, we retired a lot more to the members than we got from Tri-State. But that's the reason why we can't exactly match their cycle at the moment, because for many, many years, they did retire to us, but we did not retire the G&T allocation to the members. Sorry, we did not pass that on. It just didn't happen for many, many years. And so there's only been 6 G&T retirements thus far. Our 2022 budget reflects that there will be another substantial GNT retirement. So if everything goes according to plan, we will be caught up to 2004. But obviously that will mean everything going according to plan. So I'll pause there, and I can see I've got one hand up. I will keep the graph up because I think it's important.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, so is there someplace we see the the all joined together unretired? Our
Yes.
total unretired?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Okay, super. I want to go back to the slide before you are where we talk about the amount retired to members is decided by the board after considering the financial situation of the co-op. So it seems to me that there are some key places that the board really has to be thinking ahead. So when we're doing our budget for next year, we need to be thinking, okay, since our margins are going to be our allocations, we need to keep that in mind of how much do we want to be kind of allocating for the future and how much do we want to be spending right now so that we don't have big margins. The other thing we need to be thinking about is, are we going to have enough cash next year? If we have a goal, let's say that we've made a strategic decision to, we don't ever want to go beyond 20 years on our retirements. So when we're looking at the budget, we want to make sure that we plan the cash also around, okay, what kind of cash are we going to need in order to retire our 2004 or whatever number we're at allocations. Am I correct that our duties start much earlier than when by the time you come and say, okay, we're ready to retire this, we would have been thinking about this last year when we were doing the budgeting.
Correct. Yeah, that is right. I mean, with retirement, it really is your cash situation that is the only one that matters, if you like. I think that the kind of tri-state situation this year is a really good illustration. I mean, obviously they're a GNT co-op and we're a distribution co-op, so their business model is somewhat different. But I think the pushback, and I know Cola, you were at the meeting, was we don't want to borrow money to retire capital credits because we don't actually have enough cash to do this. And that would, if we got to the point in next fall, say, and I said, yeah, I still want to go ahead with the plan, but I'd like to borrow some money to do it, I would expect the same response from you guys. In fact, I wouldn't make the recommendation because I don't want to borrow money to do a retirement. You really need to have those cash reserves on hand. As the budget that you guys just approved last month, if we follow that, then we will be fine to retire as we have planned. But obviously things happen. So, if we get a huge fire or a huge weather event, things may change.
Right. So as we plan our budget and we say, okay, it looks like we're going to have enough cash, then we also are planning that we are going to borrow for capital improvements, right? So that,
yep.
Do we sometimes not borrow for capital improvements and then we get to the end of the year and think, oh, we don't have enough cash. I wish we had borrowed earlier for capital improvements, because then it looks like we're borrowing to do a retirement, but really we borrowed earlier in the year for something that we didn't borrow earlier in the year for something that maybe we should have or could have.
Right. So if we take this year as an example, we thought we would borrow money and we didn't. But we got, that's a good point. When I'm looking at, Dan and Jerry and Garrett and I and with the help of Drew's team in terms of the reporting, we're meeting constantly looking at what's the progress on our capital items, capital projects. What do we need? Should I go and draw down on my credit line now? But we got to the point where we don't think we need to until 2022, and we're still good to pay out our retirements without borrowing and keep, you know, as you saw, we were slightly under our goal for cash, but we know that at the end of December, we're going to be fine. So
that non-borrowing was at a cost. And that cost was that it took our cash down to the point that when we had a brief discussion about, well, maybe we should get rid of some of these margins so we don't have such bloody big margins this year. And the answer was, well, we can't do that because of cash, and we don't want to borrow money to pay retirements. And yet we didn't borrow earlier when we could have. So are we really borrowing for retirements, or are we for the capital projects that we could have done earlier? It's all in one bucket. So I want to be cautious about us saying we're not going to borrow for retirements when we didn't borrow for what we should have borrowed for.
Well, we retired more in 2021 than we ever have. So
absolutely,
I don't think there's a cost because, you know, we retired over $5 million, which we've, you know, around 5.5.
And we're $3 million over in margins, budgeted margins.
Yeah, but that's not cash.
I know it's not cash, but one thing that we could have done was done a bill credit. And the reason we couldn't do the bill credit is because we didn't have enough cash. And the reason we didn't have enough cash is because we didn't borrow for our capital stuff. So it's all one big circle here. And I'm not saying that we should have borrowed. I'm just saying if we need to keep in mind that we need cash at the end of the year to do retirements, then we need to be borrowing the money when we should be borrowing it. You're saying we don't need to borrow until 2022, but maybe we need to be borrowing earlier on those capital stuff so that we don't run ourselves low on cash, so we can't do our planned retirements. If retirements is and it may not be of this board, if it's a strategic priority of this board to do a 20-year retirement or 15-year retirement or whatever bloody heck it is, then we need to make sure that we're planning through the year that we have the cash come the fall or the April or whenever to do these retirements. Okay. And that's on us, board. That's not on Carl.
Well, I don't think it's on you, because we actually retired more than we budgeted. And we did do the bill credit, although it wasn't a bill credit, it was a LIFO retirement, but those essentially become the same thing. And we did it for $1.5 million. And if you look at our the November results thus far, we're only 1.1 million to the good on gross margins. So we actually credited the members more than we saved. So I really don't think this is a situation at all, because we retired more than we budgeted. We did do a bill credit. We have done all the construction we could do this year with the resources we had. And I don't mean cash resources, I mean just available time and available people. And we also retired more than we thought we would. And we're going to finish within our targeted range. So I'm going to push back and say, I think between us as a staff and you as a board, we got it dead right.
Fair pushback. I appreciate that. I wasn't thinking about the 1.2 million, which was basically about the G&T reducing our rates. That's what prompted that, correct?
Right.
Okay. So fair pushback. I want to still leave my point out there of that sometimes it is appropriate to quote borrow money to pay retirements if it still meets the other goals of the board, because especially if we missed an opportunity to borrow to meet our capital needs, our capital projects and such.
Well, so sorry, Kirsten, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, because I know you don't like it when I say that. So I'd like everybody to hear your viewpoint on this.
I would rephrase that to say that if you don't borrow for capital projects and then you use the money you should have retired to fund them, then you're doing it wrong. Does that make sense?
I'm with you. Perfect. Thank you for that rephrase. I think we are now in violent agreement.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Joe, thanks for being patient. You're up.
Yeah, so back to what Kirsten was saying, is there a line in the budget that we just passed that says we're planning on retiring, you know, this much money next year, or is that just decided at the end of the year?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joe, because it's in there, but it's not altogether clear because it's not in the income statement. It's a balance sheet movement. So it is there in terms of the movement of the patronage capital account and the movement on the cash account, but it's not a single item that you can pull out.
And then, I mean, the amount is then really decided after it's audited and everything else, right? Yeah.
Well, the retirement is in our budget. The allocation is what's audited. So the retirement, where we decide how much are we going to pay out to the members, is built into our final cash number on our budgeted balance sheet.
Okay. And then the other question, so do we still have a rate stabilization fund, and are the TS allocations going towards that?
We have a rate stabilization fund of $4 million, but at this time we are building that up from our own operating cash reserves. It was $3 million at the end of last year, so we've added $1 million to it. And no, we are not using the tri-state money to build that up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we as a board, after a recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee, set a goal for cash, right? We see that every month. That's the one that fluctuates. You know, that's the fulcrum upon which we can make the decision around what level of retirement. That's how we budget for it. That was the whole purpose of it. Maybe not the entire purpose. It's also about operating cash and so forth. We spent a lot of time in the FAC, including you, I think Kirsten was there, discussing the parameters around it to come up with that number. We will look at that again in the spring, right? But that is the budget point. We don't know what the cash will be. You know, it's like you run your household, you run your business, and at the end of the year, do you take more cash out of your account to buy those Christmas presents, or do you keep it in the kitty because you're worried about the bills you're gonna have to pay in January, right? So it's a goal, it's a parameter, and baked into that is the idea that we will make a retirement that is in line with our goals of the 20-year roughly allocation retirement. So that, I think, is the fulcrum, and that's where we should be putting our budgetary effort into, and it was approved by the entire board. Thanks.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It is a very important point that it is approved by the board, and that we do that early so that when we get to the next year and we start balking at it, then we have to be like, well, wait a second, we did this last year. And I think that Carl's point of, if we don't do retirements because we didn't borrow for capital credits, we did it wrong, is the way to think about this. Because cash, it's not like all of a sudden we get to the end of the year and we don't have enough cash. We should be seeing all along the way of, okay, we've got cash. And then we know that every quarter it kind of goes low because we're paying something. But then if we're seeing that fulcrum get out of balance, there's stuff to do earlier in the year so that we don't have to suffer, or so that our retirements don't have to necessarily suffer. Because then it looks like we're borrowing money to do retirements, when actually we're really borrowing money to do the capital credits that we didn't borrow on before. So I really like the way, one, that you're looking at the fulcrum, and two, the way Carl is looking at the kind of keeping that fulcrum all along the way, so that we don't get out of whack too early or too late and can't do what we wanted to do at the end. So I appreciate both of you on that.
Great. Thank you for that. All right, Carl, back to you.
John, I think we had a break scheduled at 10:30. Did you want to take that and then we'll continue after?
How much more time do you think you need here?
I would think it's a good 20 minutes, half hour, because I think the tri-state slide will invite quite a lot of questions.
Okay, then I think given that, then I do think we should take a break. So it is 10:33 right now. How about we take a 10-minute break? We'll see you guys at 10:43. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Carl.
There we go. So we were on retirements. So as we've mentioned, we are a member of a number of co-ops ourselves, and all of these entities allocate and retire capital credits to us. So obviously Tri-State is the big one, but we also get allocations and retirements from CFC, Federated Insurance, Western United, and NISC. And we also still get some retirements, not much anymore, from co-ops we've been a member of in the past. So I think we may have got everything we're gonna get from Basin, but we were at some point getting money from them as well. But these are the big ones, and Tri-State is by far the biggest in terms of dollars that they allocate to us and that they retire to us. I'd imagine CFC may well be a bigger business, but they have a lot more members as well. So this, I think, is very interesting. This is the history of Tri-State's allocations and retirements to us. So the blue bars are the allocations and the orange bars are the retirements. And we've got from 98 onwards here. Now you can probably see for most years, they were certainly allocating a whole lot more than they were retiring. And you look at those mid-2000 years, it's a huge difference. This is once again where I don't have the huge benefit of historical understanding here, but I believe around those points, they were getting quite a lot of kind of non-cash income coming in, some accounting adjustments, some revaluations. I think there was also something to do with the New Mexico co-ops coming in, but that is purely that there is a degree of speculation in that. I believe that huge 07, 08, and 09 spike was some revaluation entries in their books, which elevate profit but don't give you any cash. So that's why we got allocated nearly 10 million and retired, you know, it looks like $4.50, but no, it was probably a bit more than that. If we look and then we go out to 2020 and 2021, 2021, we do know what we got retired because that happened in January. I think Kirsten had a question, do we take our retirement in December or January? We have taken them in January since, well, for a long time. The rationale for that in terms of why I continue to do it is so that you don't get a mismatch year on year. You get one retirement a year rather than two. I would imagine that whether it was my predecessor or his predecessor or whoever first decided that, they may have done it because there's a debt payment to make in January. So possibly maybe why they did it. That's why we take it in January, and we will be getting that $1 million from Tri-State in January 2022. What's, one thing we need to obviously think about is, and Kirsten touched on this, is this retirement that we got in 2021 is certainly, they're not retiring this. They're retiring somewhere around here. I think it was actually 2003 that they gave us in 2021. So you can see that those are reasonably similar, but that's purely coincidental. They will what Tri-State's policy is that they'll come up with a number first. So they thought this year they came up with 10 million after considering 30. They come up with a number, and how that gets allocated to the members is just based on, what you've got outstanding. So that's how they do it. Any questions on this one?
I've got a quick question.
Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
I think I started to go cross-eyed a little bit, so just want to make sure I'm thinking about this correctly. I understand allocations and retirements are separate, distinct. So I'm looking at this chart and I see, let's say, so from the Tri-State notes, we found out that they're retiring their 2004 allocations this year. And so if I look at 2004, we have the blue bar, which is their allocation of 4.5 million or something. And then there's the orange bar, which you said is $4.50. And so is it that they retired $4.50 that year from who knows whenever?
Right.
And so, okay. And so the orange bar for this year will actually be representing something pulling from the blue bar from 2004.
Correct. Absolutely
Okay.
right.
Great. Thank you.
And Joe?
So, so these are the allocations. The blue bar is the allocation to LPEA or their total allocations across the system?
Just to LPEA.
Okay. So, again, on the blue bar, so are these cumulative then?
Oh, that's what we got that year. So you see that 2007, they actually allocated us $9.5 million.
Okay, and we spent that in some way in 2000.
Well, it's not cash. That's their promise to pay. What we got in cash are those orange bars, which are a lot smaller.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
I got Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Hey, help me understand and remind me why in this chart we showed Tri-State just focus on the orange retirements in the early 2000s. And then if you go back to slide on page 69, G&T retirements, we don't show any in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that's that kind of anomaly where we don't allocate any G&T credits if we have other non-operating losses. And that's where we had those non-operating losses from the subsidiary in the early 2000s.
Are you familiar with the WASADI history at LPEA?
I believe that's the one we're talking about.
Be that time frame when there was a wholly owned subsidiary, institutional knowledge. I know Dan knows that all really well, but LPEA decided to do its own contracting work and created a contracting company, and subsequently lost a bunch of money. And that, I think that's that. But you're saying because of the way we decided to use that money in that time, it doesn't show up on the chart on 69.
That's our policy. If that's what you do, if you've got zero non-operating income or negative, you shouldn't allocate any G&T.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Who's that? Is it Rachel or Dan? I don't know who was next.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, am I correct in if we total these blue bars here, accumulate the blue bars on this slide, that should equal the G&T total allocation to LPA around $70 million.
You'd have to take the sum of the blue and minus the orange, Dan, to get that.
Yeah, and Carl, that's around 75 million, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking straight then. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Rachel.
Okay, so so we're gonna get, let's say it's $1 million from our 2004 allocation retired to us this year. And so let's say that leaves 3.25 million that was allocated to us that same year that isn't yet retired. When will we get that, or when could we get that, or is there a possibility we'll never get that? Because
there's no possibility we'll never get that, but it could take a while. Depends what Tri-State decide to do. If they did another 10 million in 2022, then we'd once again get something quite similar. If they only retired 10 million a year, they'd be on 100-year cycle. It would take them 100 years to get caught up. So that's obviously not sustainable. But it really depends on how they do in 2022. But I would imagine we'll get the majority of 2004, but you just don't know. I think that's okay. So I think this is another one that you guys wanted to see. This is what we've got right now, and this is everything. There's nothing older than 1998 of unretired LPEA capital credits. So we touched on when we were looking at the history of retirements that G&T credits were just not being retired for many years. So that's why we've got some of these old ones. We got caught up thanks to that big retirement we were able to do this year. We got rid of, there was a little bit from 96 and 97 that's gone. We got rid of a lot of 98, but there's still a little bit there. So the plan in 2022 is to get rid of both of those, plus have a crack into that 2001 blue bar. That's what we have planned to do. That in terms of the orange bars, which is the G&T capital credits that have been allocated to the members, that will get us caught up to 2004, which will be very nice. And we'll be well on the way to getting blue because those are relatively small bars around the same level. Things will get interesting in 2007, as you can see, because there's some huge numbers around. I mean, we're obviously not going to retire. Well, I'm going to say that I find it hard to imagine myself coming to you asking for a $15 million retirement, but who knows what the future may bring. But in the short term, we really want to get rid of those 20th century ones. And unless something goes very badly wrong, that's what we're going to do next year. And then we want to try and maintain that 18 to 20 year cycle. So we need to get, it'd be nice to get, I think it will take us 2 or 3 years to get there, to get to 18, but I think we can get to 20 relatively quickly. But once again, it all depends on on where we are at. If we are really struggling, if something goes wrong, we have a huge weather event, then some of these plans have to be revisited. So once again, these orange bars, which we're showing right now, if I go, I'm just going to go back real quick. That orange bar on the one we've just looked at should kind of reflects the blue, but some of these blue, you can see on here that this blue bar for 98, a lot of that has been retired. That's why this one on the next chart is actually lower than 99. And then you've got some other anomalies where, like Bob was asking about, where you've got these allocations from 2001, 2002. But when we look at our chart, because of our other non-operating losses, we've got no orange there. And that's, I think someone who's been around longer than I would have to comment, but that's also why 2004, I believe some of those losses were still coming through, and that's why that bar isn't as big as on the previous one. I think once you get into the mid to late 2000s, these are very much like one for one.
Okay, Kirsten, go ahead. Kirsten, do you have a comment?
Two questions, Carl, very similar. We didn't allocate in our G&T funds in the early knots, and you've explained why. So when that gets retired to us, we don't have anybody to send that to, at least for those years, but we will pay other years.
Correct.
For that? Okay.
Yep.
And then what happens if we do have, so we do have a lot of G&T allocations here that are unretired. What happens in, say, 10 years and that Tri-State goes bankrupt and they're no longer going to be retiring anything to us? What happens to our books? We have all these allocations, but no money to pay it with because we didn't get it from the G&T. This is all theoretical, of course.
Yeah, that's where you would have to make some sort of adjustment, because obviously you've got this receivable on your books that's becomes essentially worthless. And then, you know, I don't exactly know what we do with the other side. I believe we can make another adjustment that would offset us having to write off, but that's really starts getting quite complex, and I would have to seek kind of counsel from our auditor and from our lawyer.
Okay, well, hopefully we never have to deal with that.
Yeah, I really hope not.
Right. So understanding that it's a you use the word receivable. So understanding that it's a receivable is very helpful, that we would basically they would no longer be a receivable, and we'd have to do something on that other end. And what that is may be terribly complex, but that's very helpful. Thank you.
Tim, go ahead.
So mindful of our partial contract town halls and the projection of savings, much of which, you know, we've made no decision on, but one of the decisions could be to utilize it to retire allocations on an accelerated basis. I wonder, is there too short a period? All right, now we're talking 20 years. I mean, is there a point where if you got it down to 10, that's not a good practice? And I can't see any reason why, but I'm just curious. I think there's the potential here to utilize savings beginning in 2023 on rates to build cash to make accelerated retirements. That is an option, right? Something we all will have to consider at some point if the partial contract turns out to be taken up and achieve the savings we're talking about. So I'm just posing that as kind of a thought bubble for all of us here. And, and part of that is, is 10 years or less too short a window? Something like that. I don't know. Anyway, we need a marker somewhere in there.
You rarely see below 15, but it does happen in terms of a cycle. But one thing I'd certainly agree, Tim, is if we are realizing the savings, and if we go ahead, and I'm very, very confident that we would, I would be recommending annually that we do accelerate the G&T retirement, just as because of the unpredictability, that we were just touching on.
Right.
If we can afford it, we should. Is really where I'm going with that.
Right. Obviously, a rate decrease, but also an accelerated reduction of our obligation, essentially.
Yeah, I believe so, because you want to be able to meet your obligation yourself without having to rely on someone else.
Right. So again, that's a consideration that we'll have at some point. I'm just trying to say, what would be the parameters we'd operate within on that? So
yeah, this is something we've been batting around in our Colorado CFO group. We're probably going to make a kind of subgroup of the co-ops that are interested in possible, full or partial exits, because I see some of those who are quite happy with the arrangement groaning and don't want to talk about this stuff. So we need to think about what do we do, because this is a world none of us have really seen before.
All right, thank you, Carl. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Okay. More?
Okay. We good to move on, John?
We are. Just a quick time check. We're we spent a more time than originally budgeted on this, but it's clearly high value, and I think everybody is getting a lot out of it. So I don't want to rush you at all, but definitely let's be mindful of the time as we move to the end of this presentation.
Yeah, this is the final slide. So, and I think
Terrific.
Most of this has been touched on already. As I mentioned, the 2022 budget is assuming a $4.5 million capital credit retirement, where we will clear out those 98 and 99 balances that we saw on the previous graph. And that's around 3.5-ish, with about $1 million left that I would probably look at splitting between 2001 and 2021. So we do a small LIFO allocation. Another possibility is we may, depending on how the year is progressing, we may look at another mid-year LIFO allocation if that is financially possible. Going beyond 2022's budget, we're probably going to be looking at maybe co-op only in 23, as we would have caught up G&T to 2004. So we'd like to get them kind of matching, possibly, but this once again is subject to where we're at with the partial, where we're at with cash. If we can accelerate those G&T ones out, as we mentioned, that would not be a bad idea. So that's really all I have on future plans.
Okay. Wow. Well, that was super strong.
Thanks, John.
Any last questions for Carl? Great. All right. Well, again, thank you for this. I think these deep dives on sort of the important topics is super high value, even if it's a little dense. And I definitely appreciate all the prep time that went into that. It was very, very clear and well organized. So thank you for that.
Thank you, John.
Hey, John. John, it's Joe.
Yes.
This would be great to show to new board members as they come on too. So
Yeah, no doubt.
There's
point.
also a great class on this. In our ECA does a great class on capital credits, and it's two days of just slamming it at you. But there's a lot to know. So I'm suggesting people do that.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for that. Okay, last call for Carl. Okay, let's push on then. So we are, just to reorient people back to the main agenda, we are on item 5, board action agenda. We've got a couple of items here. So start with Finance and Audit Committee update. Who is doing that?
I am. All right.
Terrific.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Thank you, John. First, just a quick reflect back on what we just saw. I think that's the best set of charts that helped explain a lot of words about allocations and retirements and connecting G&T with us. So I just want to also say nice job to Carl. The Finance and Audit Committee met on December 9. We were all in attendance. I accidentally said Jessica was in attendance, but she was in DC doing her important work there. So we went ahead and met for an hour. We didn't have finances to really review. We know that month-end issue kind of keeps us from seeing things until the tri-state bill comes in. But what we spent a really nice productive hour on was basically an after-action review of the 2022 budget process that we've engaged in all throughout 2021. And while we did look at some suggestions, and they're in the bullet points here for what I would call ideal state, it's a little bit more like polishing the apple, because we want to say that the process was really good and staff did an incredible job. And concepts like zero-based budgeting and departmentally centered costs, and that approach that was instituted last year, now it's in its second year, it seems to us, and I think Jessica and staff would say is really working well. So our suggestions are just to polish the apple a bit, and it has mostly to do with timing. So in those bullets, one kind of guiding principle was, I think the only pinch point that came up this year sometimes was whether or not there was enough time to really review the budget before it was going to be at an FAC or at a board meeting. The timing in general is the right thing. I think Carl and Monica agree that if we the board and the FAC see the income statement in October and the capital projects and items budget in November with enough time to review, then that's the right thing. It gives staff enough time, gives us enough time, and it also lines up with, it's nice to have the full budget approved in November. It can be pushed back if time is needed by staff, but if in the future, and it may come again down the line, if Tri-State's rates are going to increase and we had to pass on a rate increase to our members, we want to do that in January, and therefore you'd have to approve a budget in November. So those are the thoughts in our mind. The timing was right. A little bit of lead time is better. We also thought that adding a COW, committee of the whole, for the full board to review the whole budget, the final budget in November would be useful, instead of trying to pack it in real tight into these meetings that are tightly and well managed, but having a little more latitude of time on a COW the Monday in November would be good. Covered most of this. A couple things we said about guiding principles here too is that there should be clear expectations about what you're going to get on the income statement or capital, how much detail. So there were questions about that. So ahead of time, knowing what exactly is going to be in that, with income statements, mainly forecasting margins, which drives much of the rest of the budget, but being aware of how much detail you'll get and what you won't get and when you'll get the rest of it later is part of what we suggested. Then to Carl's point earlier, And because goals have been talked about quite a lot and we're above some of those goals, we agree that we will review goals and targets for all those financial targets in 2022. I think, Carl, we said April after Form 7 and those kind of things are put to bed. It was the time we agreed on during the meeting. It could be March, but I think we said April in the meeting. And then in the next year budget cycle, which will be the 2023 budget, there'll need to be some provisions or scenarios for what if this partial contract thing happens, and what if A, what if B, and budgets. But there may be a couple different scenarios to those budgets that we look at next year. I think Tim had also pointed out that one bullet I didn't capture is that just going into this, we'd probably ask Carl and Monica for some basic assumptions, things like what do we expect for inflation and those kind of things, and cost curves and supply chain, and what assumptions might we want to know exist before the budget starts being built. For us, the budget starts in August, September. For staff, it starts back in June from the bottom up. So we know it's almost a year-long process for them. And I'll close by saying well done, and staff does a fantastic job. And with a few tweaks, we think it can be even better next year. So that's the report I have.
Terrific. Thank you. Any questions for Bob?
I think you're muted, John.
I am. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions for Bob? Okay. Onward. Okay. So policy committee update. Who's driving? Ted, you're up.
Yeah. So just a real brief one here. Committee on Policies hasn't met again since the full board approved the modifications to the 400 series policies that we went through in sort of the August-September timeframe. The committee did agree that that the process that we went through worked very well and allowed a thorough review without excessive in meeting board time. So we intend to continue that process going forward on future policy review. And really the document that I included, I think page 76, lines out our expectations for schedule really for 2022 in terms of kind of when we plan on meeting to put together our proposal for policy changes, and then when we plan on having actual board votes on those proposals. Of course, in between the proposal and the vote, we'll entertain the same process that we did in the past, where it goes out to the full board. Comments are accepted and reviewed before we come to the full board for a vote on whatever's transpired there. We had originally planned on just kind of trying to proceed through the policies numerically, starting with the 400s and then moving down to the 300 series, 200 and 100. But obviously we need to be flexible there when certain policies need to be reviewed based on upcoming events, such as the case with policy 105 that discusses director elections. And so we've moved that to the front of the list to attempt to make some suggestions and then hopefully have the board accept some modifications to that policy, in light of issues that may have been presented in previous elections. So that'll be a little bit of a wham bam. We're going to meet in January, and the expectation would be that by the February board meeting, we've already gone through all the levels of board participation review, and we're ready to vote on that in February board meeting. So I won't go through the rest of the bullet points there. You guys can review it, but the point is to kind of expect to be able to put in a little bit of extra time out of meetings to review the recommendations that the Committee on Policies put out and supply your feedback. So that's all I've got. entertain any questions if there are. And I see Sue's hand up, so go ahead.
Thanks. I would also like to suggest that the committee review policy 108. This was kind of brought up after the CEO review. Unfortunately, our policy contradicts federal law because the policy says that we won't disclose any employee's compensation, benefits, etc. But the Form 990 requires us to do that. So I would suggest that maybe the policy committee take a look at that particular policy and take it in line with the federal law in that respect.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, to be clear, you're not the only one that's brought that question up in the recent past. We will add that to a topic of conversation for our January meeting and be prepared to in the January Committee on Policy meeting and give an update as to our proposed direction in the January board meeting.
Great, thank you very much.
Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I meant to do this and I ran out of time to go back and look at all the policy numbers. Is your review including I think it's code of conduct, or I don't know, the ethics policy? Is it captured in here? Because it came up a bunch last year.
Do you know that one offhand, Graham? Is that probably a 100 series? Yeah.
Yeah, ethics is 129. So I suppose, like you said, if we can have some flexibility on if we need to address anything specific like 105 that we sort of need to get some changes made to it to address changes in the cooperative governance law that were passed last year. If we have things that we need to change, we can sort of move that around a little bit. I think we're sort of doing the kind of big picture overhaul without sort of losing sight of urgent matters.
So that would be my only addition, Rachel, to that is that, if your question about when might that be addressed, if you feel like there's something that makes addressing that policy more time sensitive or critical than the bullet point schedule that you're looking at, we should talk about that. But the flip side to that is, when it's not something that's sort of legally mandatory that we change, I think we have to be cognizant of pulling individual policies out of this process will delay our review of all of the policies. So certainly not that it can't happen, but I think everyone would come up with a different list of which ones are the priorities. What do we do first, second, third? But the goal here is to get through all of them and in a timely fashion. So if it can wait until October, then it fits right in with what we're trying to do. But if you see a reason why we need to, address it more quickly than that, we should definitely talk about it.
Cool. Sounds good. I will just flag on that because time-wise sounds fine. It's exciting. It'll get touched on. It might be good to set someone on sniffing that track out earlier than that meeting, because I know it seemed like it came up in 4 or 5 different ways, and there were all kinds of ways to handle it. So it might require a little research in advance.
Yeah, there is certainly some historical documentation on that from previous, I think, COP meetings. And just so the way this schedule works, COP does see it like 2 or 3 months before we're expected to vote on it. So there's a fairly long period where it's being initially discussed at the committee level, and then outside of a meeting discussed at a board level. So yeah, I mean, it's expected that some of these individual policies will take up a lot of bandwidth outside of the board meetings. It's totally expected. Any other questions? Okay, John, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Rock solid presentations on both. Okay, we are now back on, slightly ahead of schedule for the moment. And so the current agenda would have us break at noon. We got about another 35 minutes. What I suggest we do is carry on all the way up until 12 for our normally scheduled lunch break, and have Graham do his, actually, hang on, let me double check this. Yeah, so I'm gonna have do the lunch break. Jessica, maybe this is more of a question to you. Do you want to just go in to do the executive session matters before the lunch break, or maybe knock off a bunch of the reports in section 9, and then do lunch, then do executive session? Whatever you think is logistically easiest.
Since we don't have Matt calling in, we could jump into executive session if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think why don't we just keep working down the calendar on order then. And then we'll come out of executive session. Hopefully executive session won't go long. If it does, we'll finish it, come out, break for lunch, and then pick it up and bring it all the way home. Okay, sound good to anybody? Does that work for everybody? Okay, cool. Okay, then let's take a moment and make sure that everybody has their dial-in numbers for executive session. If they don't,
and then we'll need a motion and a vote to go into executive.
Yep. Let me get the get the mechanics up and running. So everybody got their Zooms, and then when we're ready to go, we'll need a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
It's Tim, I heard first, and Ted is second. So all in favor, hold your hands up, say aye. Okay, all opposed, say no. All abstained.
There's a no. So maybe you
you.
need some discussion. I don't know. Just curious.
I'm sorry. Let's back that up. Kohler, did you want to?
No, I'm a yes. I'm just delayed on my
slow.
Zoom. So I am
slow on the trigger. Okay, great. So we were unanimous on going into executive session. So we will see you guys on the other side.
And along those lines, John, if you don't mind me saying that, because we're not getting an update from our FERC attorneys, I don't think there's any reason why Kohler can't participate in the entire executive session. I don't know, Jessica, are you familiar with any other information that would prohibit Kohler from participating?
No, I think you're correct.
All right. Well, Kohler, Christmas come early. Glad to have you in the executive session. We'll see you over there. We need a motion.
I move that we approve the legal action that was discussed in the executive session.
Excellent, thank you.
Is that sufficient, Graham?
It is, thank you.
Great, I heard Bob was second, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? All abstained? And that's it. We're good. Okay, thank you. All right, it is 12:10, and we had a 30-minute lunch break scheduled, so we will see you all back here at 12:40. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead. Okay, so resuming the today's agenda, we completed item Roman numerals. There was no Roman numeral 6. We completed Roman numeral 7 and 8. So the last item for the day are the general reports, starting with item 9. We'll hear from Graham on the attorney report, highlights and questions, and then we'll go into the director reports. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay. Back to you,
Okay.
Graham.
Thank you. So I think everybody's hopefully had a chance to review my report. And so opening up to questions, I guess, Kirsten, do you want me to sort of address some of the quote
Sure.
legal questions from your email?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So a lot of these looks like are in sort of response to my memo on questions versus concerns and complaints and things of that nature. And so I think, Kirsten's first question was, is it reasonable that we allow members to ask questions during the public comment period at the beginning of the board meeting, but we make it clear that we do not expect to answer the question during that same time? It certainly is what we've done in the past, just verifying. And I mean, I think the idea is to get the most appropriate response. We sort of say that would be best if I think sort of like we handled it last month, please submit it through the director this way in writing. And we got a written question from that member. He did follow up on his questions with the directors, and the directors were able to directly respond to him in conformity with our policy 122. So I think it winds up with I think invariably questions are sort of going to come out in that section. And I think it's just sort of for meeting management that we be able to say the most direct avenue for you to get your question responded to in the most appropriate manner is this way. So that would be sort of my response. I mean, I think it just, and like you said, that part of that, the question will sort of invariably come out. And at that time, we sort of make it clear that we're not going to be able to come up with an answer, and that if you follow this procedure, we'll get you that answer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I totally get not given an answer at the time. What I'm uncomfortable with is if a member bothers to come to a meeting and bothers to raise their hand and ask a question, putting in another roadblock saying, oh, well, send us an email about that. It does not feel good member service.
No. And I totally get that, right? But then it becomes sort of difficult that question comes sort of, and we don't have sort of a written record of that question and sort of how to respond to it and such, that it makes it to me, it makes it possible to get lost in the shuffle, right? You made this question at the beginning of a meeting. We've said we won't be able to answer it right now. And I'm sort of concerned for that member's question getting lost in the shuffle if it doesn't follow these other proceedings that sort of allow it to be tracked a little more concretely.
I'm going to let other folks speak, hoping that somebody brings up my point.
Certainly. So Sue?
All right, thank you. I have to totally agree with Kirsten. Historically, members have been able to ask questions, which then the board and or staff responded to based on their verbal question at the meetings. And I too think if a member is going to bother to come to our meeting, they don't want to be brushed off or felt like that we are putting up roadblocks. We tout being transparent. And if we're only going to accept comments that are positive and maybe not questions that the whole board can hear and respond back to that member afterwards, I don't think that's a good practice. In this situation, I'm not sure if when the member filed his question then via email, I know it came to us in District 4, but I have no idea if the rest of the board saw his written question or saw the written response that John sent back to him. So I too have concerns with not allowing members to really feel like they're a part of the meeting and be able to ask questions if they have them at the time.
I think we do sort of maintain these questions and answers on Google Drive, although I will verify that.
We do, Carl. Hillary posts the questions and the answers because we had this discussion previously, and that was the answer that the board came up with, is that we would post the questions on the Google Drive and attach the answer. And I would just say from staff perspective and my last utility, and I checked in with all the co-ops, they do not take questions and answers. They only take comments. And that's because, I think most people feel it's really hard for staff on the cusp to answer something. It's best if we can go back and research it and come back with more detailed answers. So I think that was, that's a pretty standard practice to allow staff to be able to have some time to actually give a better answer.
Well, and I don't mind staff and or the board having time to answer a question. I just don't think we should cut our members off by not allowing them to ask them. And I did not look in the Google Drive to see if the answer was there. I had received it back from what John wrote on behalf of District 4. But, for me to go into Google Drive and find an answer to a response, and I know that's my own issue, but I find that a little cumbersome also. I think it would be nice if the whole board were included in these discussions or in the correspondence. And I know Hillary's put together the Google Drive thing for us to look at, but maybe just something then, like even when John sent our response back saying, you'll also find this in the Google Drive, and send that to all of the directors so that everybody's on the same page. Thank you.
Joe?
Graham, did you say there's actually a policy that prohibits answering questions at a meeting?
It doesn't prohibit it so much as it sort of tries to categorize different things. So it says, this is our policy for questions, really comes under policy 122, and it sort of identifies how directors are to respond to questions and how they get referred to staff, and how staff returns those questions to the board and or returns the answers to the board, things of that nature. So I mean, it's not, the idea isn't necessarily that there's an absolute prohibition against questions. It's sort of that it's more of the way it's structured, right? It's structured that the law says this is where comments go, this is where complaints go, and this is where questions go, right? And part of the idea is just a practicality of tracking that through each of them, right? And sort of a comment is sort of I would say a sort of a one-off statement that somebody makes, and there's not really necessarily a response that's automatic to it. It's a sort of opportunity for public statement and to be heard on the member's opinion on that issue. Then there's a complaint, which sort of needs to be followed up on and heard both sides on through a sort of hearing procedure. And we have a pretty detailed policy 363, that details all of that. And then there's the questions, which covers both sort of questions, which kind of covers questions outside of the meeting too, and sort of how it relates back to what we kind of talked about last year with the one voice policy of how do we sort of take questions and sort of get them to get them to be answered and get those answers sort of taken care of in a manner that
Well, I
has the
just,
procedure.
when I was first elected to the board and Bob was president, when people came in and they had some questions, Bob would either answer them or give them to staff to answer. Now, those are, I have mixed feelings about this because, when they're simple questions, they can be answered right away. I think it's a good idea. It does show our transparency and that we're welcoming, people to our meetings. Obviously, some of those people came in and they were making statements and wanted to argue and didn't want an answer to a question. So, I don't know, maybe we need to discuss this at another meeting, but I think, if people have some real basic questions that can be answered, I think we should try to provide those at the meeting. That takes less time for staff later on, especially when we know the answer right away. And I think we do have to be aware of our history because, that has gone on, I'm assuming, for many years. In the past, but maybe I'd like to, maybe we could revisit this at some point, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to call on myself because I want to weigh in with my own opinion, and then I'll put my hand back down to go back to managing the meeting. I also feel quite strongly about this. I believe it's an absolute can of worms to engage in a dialogue in a public setting, because the simple fact, even if you were to ask a pointed question that had nuances, it's virtually impossible for us to answer as one voice without at least conferring amongst ourselves, and we have no mechanism to do that. And then furthermore, it just becomes a mechanism to just shove people into a corner. He refused to answer the question. She didn't know the answer to that. It just becomes an absolute forum for sort of gotcha communications. I've never seen a board like I've been to the county meetings and the city meetings and all sorts of meetings. People take the questions, people take the public comment. But it's not a forum for a discussion. And even if you were to entertain a conversation, and then whoever was managing the meeting, if it's me or a future president, has no easy and convenient mechanism to cut you off, to say, actually, she doesn't have to answer that question. Actually, that's an inappropriate question. There's no way for me or anybody else to judge the appropriateness when a question that may begin with a routine matter all of a sudden cuts to either a personal question, an attack, orthogonal to an unrelated political matter. I just think it becomes impossible to manage in any practical way. And then the last comment I would make on this subject is in support of your position, Joe. There's a basic sort of human element here. If somebody's asking a trivial question like, when is the next meeting? Like, you just know it, you can answer it. I mean, I think there's just a basic human, answer the question. I have seen boards where the entire board will sit there with their arms folded and simply refuse to speak at all. Sort of San Francisco, when I lived there, had a particularly contentious board of supervisors, and they absolutely, as a matter of policy, simply refused to even, answer how are you guys today? Oh, we're good. And so I think we're not there. This is Durango, and I think there's a basic humanity here that we can answer trivial questions. But any form of dialogue, I think, should be heavily discouraged. That's my personal opinion. So we'll go ahead and put my hand down and return to managing the meeting. Okay, Kirsten, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting an energy efficient refrigerator installed, so there's going to be a little background noise. I'm not advocating for a discussion. I am advocating it for be another means for getting questions in. So for instance, last meeting, if we repeat back to the gentleman, so I believe the question is, you want to know how many directors read the RFP? And he says yes or no. And then we say, okay, we're going to have to get back to you on that. It's not a dialogue. It's a forum for getting a question in where we don't say, where we don't put another roadblock in the way. And that's what I'm concerned about is the perceived roadblock. Yes, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it's also, they showed up, man. And we're saying, okay, great, send us an email. We don't really care that you showed up. Thank you.
Great. Rachel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was going to add some things about the mechanics of it too. I agree with what you were saying, John, where if it just feels more human, and maybe one framing piece, because we always intro like, hey, welcome, public comment, 5 minutes, no more, da, da, da. And if we just add that one more piece about, we welcome comments and questions, just so you know, it's not a dialogue space, and we'll let you know if things are coming back around. And I don't know, just helping people understand that if they get crickets after a comment, it's not because no one's listening, it's because that's just our process.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say, I think what we've done and what really works is we really don't want to get into debate or exchange, but we do want to entertain comments and an occasional question. But I think we always do pretty well at relying on the judgment of the chair and the CEO when you can just be helpful and ask an informational question. I just would say, you said you used the word trivial. I wouldn't think, not necessarily trivial, just factual. If it's clean and factual, let's give them the answer. If it's anytime, my feeling always was is anytime there's a bounce back, you say, well, here's what we think we're doing. Oh yeah, well, what about? Well, then it's over. Because we're never going to go back and forth with the ping pong ball, but we will answer informational questions and we'll try to be entertaining of interest of the group. And I feel really good about relying on your judgment and Jessica's when it's a good idea to just answer that. And once it goes right past that threshold of bounce back, ping pong exchange or dispute, then it ends. So just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks for that. Let me offer this as a possible solution rather than going into a deeper dive on what is the policy. Should we be fundamentally altering this? Let's try that. I think you're right. I think in all fairness, I self-reflected after the last meeting. I did shut John down a little hard. And if I had to do that conversation over again, I probably would have been a little kinder and like you said, maybe given him a little more context instead of saying, hey, we're not prepared to answer that question right now. And I think you're right, Bob. I didn't mean to say trivial. What I meant was like a question that can be easily responded to. It's just known off the top of the head. It's a question of fact, not a question of opinion. So why don't we try that a little more organically on the next cycle and see how it goes. And if we're the vast majority of our questions that we get from the public they're well-meaning, they're genuine, they're intentional, they're not meant to be combative, and I think we could I can do a better job of both what you said before, which is teeing up the session, framing it a little better, being responsive if it's a pure factual question. If it's a bounce back, shut it down. I think that Kirsten said was correct. If we can do a simple intake, then let's do that. And just be better at being welcoming. So I'll take that as for my part in problem solving here.
Any other questions for me on that topic? So sort of along those lines, Kirsten did have a question about what is the difference between a formal complaint and comment, and so the law requires cooperatives to have a procedure for members and consumers to register complaints and be given an opportunity to be heard by the board on rates, the manner in which electric service is provided, and proposed changes to rates or regulations. And our policy 363 is the policy where that statute comes to light. And so that is the scope, is the statutory scope, rates charged by the cooperative and the manner in which electric services are provided. Since I've been here, I've taken a broad view of what falls in the manner in which electric service is provided. So basically, if somebody comes to us with a complaint that they want to see an outcome of, I steer them towards the 363 procedure. So we have definite timeframes, response times, expectations on both sides about how this will be handled, how it can be appealed or elevated, and so forth. So I've personally taken a broad view on the phrase manner in which electric service is provided to try and encourage people that have something pretty specific to go down that road. If it is perhaps more of a policy issue and it was an open-ended question, I would encourage them to go down the question route of policy 122. And if it's a policy comment where they have an idea of what they think the policy ought to be, then that would be something that would be presented amongst other ways in the policy portion or the comment portion of the meeting. But there are also other ways to communicate to either your constituent director or staff. But so that's, I try to read complaint as broadly as possible to try and give people a procedural expectation about how their concern is going to be addressed. So hope that answers that question. And then did have a question. You were interested in updates on crossover. I can give you sort of a broad view on that. As my memo said, I met with Crossover. Dan and I met with Crossover and their outside counsel to go over the latest draft of our term sheet and agreement with them. And we're really down to two sort of procedural kind of questions and sticking points. And I'm waiting on them to send us back some return language that I will review with our retained counsel that's helping us out through this. But it's not, I would just say as big picture, been very pleased with the negotiations. They've been more in the form of questions than responses or demands. They've just sort of, well, why are you looking for this term? This is why we're looking for this term. Is there some sort of mutual understanding that covers both of our concerns? And so I would just say that in the scope of negotiations at that level, I've been very pleased with the tone that Crossover takes with us of trying to sort of find what we're both trying to get to and cover both of our concerns. Dan, you got want to weigh in on that at all, or?
Nope, I'm just here to answer questions if there are any.
Yeah. So.
Thank you. That's very helpful and very reassuring too. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Does that sum up your questions, Kirsten? Did you have?
Well, the other one was about, are we what's a complaint and can't people just gripe? So people can gripe. It's just, it's never going to trigger a formal complaint process here. Questions are aside, a formal complaint process is a formal complaint process. And I'm good with that. But doesn't keep people from griping.
Yep, people are, and by statute, people are allowed to sort of have this content neutral, policy on coming to us and griping, and so that's what we're trying to facilitate at the beginning of the meeting. Thanks. Any other questions from anyone? Tim?
Okay.
So in terms of, maybe you can't answer this, I'm not sure, but in terms of the process of that potential crossover PPA, you know, drawing up an agreement is an iterative process, right? It goes back and forth. And I'm curious about when the board or members of the board have a chance to participate in that iterative process, because my brief experience on the board has been that sometimes those are very beneficial, and I don't want it to be so late that expectations have been set between parties and now board members come in and reset expectations. So thoughts on that?
I don't know, Jessica, what sort of time frame are we thinking on sort of bringing things back and forth?
Yeah,
to the board with this?
Tim, it's a great question. We actually just met, I think yesterday, about kind of the schedule. So that's why you also saw that we put a placeholder on your schedules for February 14th, excuse me, for a cow. So what we'd like to do is probably bring to the fact kind of the first iteration of these documents, and then really maybe come to the board to vote on this in March. And that's because we are running up against a clock with crossover on power costs. I actually talked to Dwayne Hiley yesterday too, and they're seeing the same thing where power costs are increasing pretty significantly. So we've got the price locked in with crossover now, and then interest rates are going up. So we need to lock in that really low interest rate with CFC. So you're going to see things at the first of the year. We're going to start pushing you documents and information right away. So I would say, you know, probably around, Dan, was it February? I think it was, or maybe parts of late January, and then filter into February, and then hope to bring it to the board in March.
And we aren't anticipating bringing agreements to the board in February for approval,
Right.
but just to put you in the loop and on where that is. I don't expect we're going to have final agreements ready for signature at that time.
Okay, that's helpful. I would just request perhaps that we are given time to review thick, you know, dense documents, with enough time for people who are interested to review and generate questions, and then be able to have that opportunity before discussions that go on. Some level of a schedule would be really helpful to know that. And it's pretty important. You know, we're trying to get out of one contract, and then we're trying to enter into a new one, and we didn't like the one that we're trying to get out of. So and we all know this, but we want to avoid that risk of getting into a contract we want to get out of that's not easy to do in the future. So more minds, in my opinion, on that is better. So thank you.
Yeah, Tim, we agree. We definitely agree with you. It's going to be important to get your eyes on this. I think right now we are kind of waiting on what happened at FERC, because there's so many moving parts that we were waiting to see if we would get towards settlement. And I can't talk too much about it because you know the FERC laws. I can't get into settlement discussions, but I think that at this point we're at a stage where we'll expedite and get these documents ready to go. I mean, Graham's working with another attorney that's a contract lawyer specifically, and so her firm is this is all they do, and so she's been working with us on making sure we don't make mistakes that we've done in the past on the contract in particular. And then we also need to make sure that any contracts talk about what would happen if methodologies go up or down, so that we actually can lock in something for certainty. I'm kind of beating around the bush on that, so we can have more discussions later on that. But yeah, I like the idea. Just because we met the other day, we'll put together a schedule of events in regards to when you should see certain documents, and we'll get that to you. I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Kirsten?
Yeah, same topic. And I believe I've asked this question before, but I have slept since the answer, or maybe I haven't slept since the answer. When we do, at some point, we're going to get far enough in our negotiations, and maybe it's not until the point we actually sign that contract, that we are in effect saying, okay, for the moment, at least, we're going with the partial requirements path. It doesn't stop us from later on going with a full buyout, but it does. We have made that decision as a board that on our 3-prong, that let's say middle prong, that would be the dominant prong, or that's going to be the one we're pursuing at the moment. When is that point? Is it really all the way up until we sign that contract?
No, I think that's where we're saying we really need to get to a vote this spring because of all these things changing on us quickly. And keep in mind, even if you vote on the 3-prong strategy and say, okay, the board is agreeing that with all the data we're seeing here, that we want to vote to go ahead and go with the middle, which is the partial. That means that then we get into serious contract negotiations with the parties and sign contracts.
Okay.
And then, but that still, I mean, it doesn't necessarily preclude the 3rd prong, which is the full buyout, because we still have to be involved at FERC on that. In just in a, monitoring situation or providing input, just because I don't think we'd want to totally be out of it. We'd still want to watch because it does impact our futures regardless.
Okay.
If you stay or not. Does that help?
Yes, it sure does. And it also really doesn't preclude the 1st prong either, because we'll still be halfway there with Tri-State. So we'll still be working with Tri-State to make rates better too.
That's correct.
Cool.
Last thoughts on this subject? Okay, Graham, you are free. Thank you. Okay, we are on 9B, Director Reports. So we'll just run down the line here, starting with the Roundup Foundation.
All right, I think I'm up on deck this month. You can find out the Roundup report on page 81. Some of the things we covered this last month were just kind of Jeannie Bennett has retired, if y'all didn't know, and she's staying on in kind of a supportive and consulting capacity for a while, but her role has kind of been divvied up between members of Hillary's team. So we just went over kind of how that's structured and how it will work moving forward. And Janelle's also helping, sorry. And then I think the other big things we just started putting together, continued to build out ideas for the February Roundup retreat, and then began work taking nominations. We'll be electing our executive committee here, I believe, this coming month. So that was kind of some of the business. And then we just have one grant that we reviewed. And I've got a middle paragraph in there just highlighting increased communication between LPEA board members in the district and Roundup as candidate seats open up. And it sounds like, thanks Kirsten for your email, that you all, the directors and the Roundup board and the existing member were already talking and communicating. So I guess moving forward, just keep that communication happening so it's not a black box. So yeah, any questions?
Joe, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think it's second month in a row where there's been at least one of the categories where there hasn't been any applicants. It was just surprising because I'd never seen, a couple of years I spent on the board, we usually had more requests than we had money for. Any thoughts on what's going on, especially in the education realm?
I don't know. I do know we're going to be taking a look at an outreach strategy at our board retreat, because yeah, it has been interesting to see low applications coming in. And I think other board members have pointed out we tend to have a recurring group of applicants and not as many kind of newer entities. So I can't say anything more about that. I don't know. Ted, do you have any comments, or anyone else?
I can add something to that. So one of the casualties of the handover between Jeannie and the new person was there was a period of time where no one was really getting back to people who had questions on grant applications. And so I can say that we have 6 applications in the queue already for the next meeting. So in part, I think it had to do with the transition, but I would really echo what Rachel said. The woman that we hired to take over Jeannie's post, she has a very strong background in comms and marketing. And we're really excited to start promoting that program a lot more broadly.
Thanks.
Great. Kirsten?
Yeah, just got my energy, energy efficient refrigerator installed, and everything's quiet here. Thanks.
Great. Tim?
So if there were a gap in the Roundup sort of applications, and now there's a queued stack, do you then allocate more funds for those queued stacks? I mean, I'd hate to think, I don't know how it works, so it's just a question. It seems like 2 months of none, now 6. Do you try and accommodate all 6 because you missed 2 months worth, or what? I don't know. Just insight.
I think it's a really good question. I was fully unaware that the reason we had those low applicants is because we were missing people. So maybe we can bring that up at a Roundup meeting.
Well, I can answer that. Tim, so in my 2 years or 2.5 years of being on the Roundup board, we have money that's been saved up over time. And so there is an opportunity to go ahead and recognize that and use more than the month allocation. So Rachel and Ted, this is to you guys for this next meeting. Keep that in mind, that you can, when you look at the budget, you can offer to go ahead and fund those with that save up of dollars. So there is an opportunity to do that.
Excellent. Thank you. That answered my question.
Great. Bob?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I just one more point of clarification there? I mean, we do in the beginning of the Roundup meeting, we look at the finances and we can see, how that bucket has grown due to various different things, but one of them being, low awards over some period of time. And so it isn't like one in, one out. We look at the available money that month. And then allow ourselves, if they're good applications, to award more than just the I guess you would call the generic monthly amount.
Great, thank you. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah. Rachel, can you say more about when you say that in that paragraph about board members are out recruiting and there's some kind of an issue with multiple of us were out recruiting, but we didn't know the other one was, or what's the thing you're talking about there?
It's something that's happened every year, as far as I can tell, where there just needs to be a clearer process for when a seat comes open. What's the communication between the board directors who ultimately nominate a post and the Roundup board who's also seemingly recruiting? And it's just a mechanics thing, and it should be a really simple, clear thing. And it just seemed like, I don't even think it's worth kind of digesting what happened, but it just points to a need for a little bit cleaner system and communication.
The only thing I've experienced mostly is it's hard to find someone. So I don't think our issue usually was we've all got too many chiming in there. We're just trying to find someone. So for what it's worth.
Great, thanks, Bob. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments for the Roundup team? Okay. Tri-State. Kohler, you're up.
Okay, well, first I'd like to thank Janelle for getting the reports included in the documents. I did not get them there before noon on Friday. We had our board meeting last week, so they're a little late. And then my power was off when I got them, so I couldn't get them into you. Anyway, you can read those reports. If you have questions, I'll take them, but I wanted to hit a couple highlights that are not in the report that might be of interest to you. The first one is a couple presentations that you'll find in our drive. And the first one is on the solar industry updates. Kind of what Jessica was just speaking about when she talked with Dwayne. And it kind of shows you what Tri-State's facing as far as new projects with availability of materials, inflation, the cost of power. It's getting quite different than it was. And they have a chart in there too that shows where it bottomed out and it's climbing up as far as the pricing. And that's, I think, important to kind of get an understanding of that as far as negotiations with crossover, but also any other projects that we might be looking at in the near future. Another presentation in the drive is about patronage capital refund. We obviously spent some time this morning on that. You might get some interest in the one that we dealt with at Tri-State. What the staff did is they gave us 3 different examples of 3 different ways we could do it with 3 different amounts. And it might generate some interest. I know there was some emails that really wanted the 30 million and then some upset emails about not getting the 30 million. But this will give you kind of a little background of what the board saw and what the finance committee dealt with. Then next month, staff is going to tee up the open season. Now, in the open season, there was 300 megawatts and 203 of them were called for with San Miguel, us, and also Pooter. So now there's roughly 97 megawatts left, and there's interest from other co-ops to reopen that for those 97 megawatts. And I think, and you kind of pat yourself on the back, a lot of them are really interested in what LPEA is doing. They're following that and saying, hey, you know, that looks pretty good. So we'll get a presentation next month and possibly action on doing that. If it goes forward, it will not change the amount that LPEA or the other 2 have. We got, I think it was 77 megawatts. That remains the same. It will not affect the people that are already prescribed. And then this would really be helpful for Jemez because they've got a couple tribes in their co-op, and there's some real opportunities if they can go to partial requirements. So I know that's one that's really big in trying to get that open season reopened. Also, the Tri-State Rate Committee has been populated for the most part. I like the way it's populated right now. There's 23 member CEOs, including Jesse is one of them. There's 11 TS Tri-State directors. There's 6 member directors. And then right now there's 2 seats that are unfilled. They might be filled, but as of the end of last week, they were not. And the first meeting will start in February, and our chairman of Tri-State actually scheduled the first 3 meetings, and then after that, the committee itself will set its own schedule. So that'll go forward. As you know, there's going to be a rate decrease, another 2% in March, and that goes for another year. So at the end, in March in 2023, Tri-State has to have something in place as far as rates go. So that's why they're starting this rate committee now, so that they have time to get this ironed out and hopefully be well prepared for that date when it comes up. Also, there's a podcast that we were asked to listen to. It's called Coal at Sunset, a Colorado Town in Transition. It was done by the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. It has 6 episodes. I've only listened to the first 2. I think that it's pretty interesting listening to. You know, I'm a guy that really struggles sometimes with change, so some of this is hard for me to swallow. But what the podcast is really talking about is the of coal generation getting knocked out and what it does to small communities, and it really focuses in on Craig. So if you have a lot of time and you're bored, you might listen to that podcast. And those are the highlights I have. So other than that, I'll just go ahead and take any questions you might have off the reports. Holly, you're up. You want to?
Thanks, Kohler. Thanks for all your hard work on this. I'm sure it takes a lot of time and energy. And I'm sorry, sir, I missed what that tri-state group that you were talking about is all about. The one that had so many board seats, so many managers, so on and so forth.
That's the rate committee. So what they do is they basically set up the rate, how they're going to do the rate to send that to FERC. And right now you're looking at formulary rates, different things like that, and how they're going to go about it.
Okay.
And a rate committee has been put together over the years. I think the last one, Bob Lynch, was our representative on that rate committee.
I see a lot of information about the responsible energy plan as well as the electricity resource plan. And Tri-State does have to talk to the PUC about their electricity resource plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they do. And there is a lot of talk about it. There's, you know, when you look at this, there's really a lot of challenges. I know Kirsten sent me a question as far as the possible transmission project on the eastern part of Colorado. And these are pretty key to be able to, you know, fulfill what we've said we will do as far as adding more renewables and stuff. There's curtailment on that transmission right now every day. It's not just now and then. It's transmission that is out there is completely overloaded. This is the same area that XL wants to put their big project in. But there's things like that. So it's a pretty busy topic all the time, every month.
Yeah, I imagine so. You know, that was an interesting thing to me. I don't know if it was you that said it, but you know, the industry is really evolving right now very quickly, and that's just one of those challenges. Sir, in the April 2020 board packet, the Tri-State Long-Term Financial Forecast presentation was included for LPEA to preview. And I apologize profusely because I've not looked at our shared drive to see if that piece of information is in our shared drive. But do you happen to know if that's one of the pieces that is in our shared drive, sir?
I don't know about April. I know the one that we just went over last week is in our shared drive.
Okay,
Yeah.
it is in there. Okay, thank you.
There's
I learned a lot
presentation
because I
on it,
looked
yeah.
at it really hard. So the April 2020.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good information in that, but it is in the shared drive.
Okay. And I think I had another question, but it's just eluded me for now. I really appreciate your work, Kohler. Thank you.
You bet. Joe?
Yeah, Cole, where is that podcast available? Do you know? Is it on the shared drive?
Yeah, you can go to cole@sunset.org, or you can just search for it in whatever podcast, you know, platform you use. I actually looked at a podcast platform and it came up right away. So it was pretty easy to find.
And and I don't mean for this to be a trick question, but in the Tri-State Director report, it says, after several years of being flat, the cost to operate the association will decrease to 1.16 billion. Any idea what kind of, is that a 1% decline or 0.5%? Do you have any idea?
It's more than that, but I can't give you an accurate one without going back through it. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Tim?
Yeah, Kohler, thanks. Thanks for the always helpful information. The rate design committee that I think you mentioned, I couldn't catch, is there representation from LPA on that committee?
Yes, Jessica is our representative.
Jessica.
So she is one of the 23 member CEOs that will be on the board, or on the committee, sorry.
All right,
Yeah.
that's really all I have. Thanks.
Kirsten?
Yeah.
You must be mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, two things. One, you've got that thing about carbon power. They send a director to each board meeting. I mean, they try to rotate through, so every one on the member distribution co-op board can see the Tri-State in action. And I would like us as a board to consider making that a goal for our own education, is that each of us attend at least one Tri-State meeting. It is our biggest expense, and it will continue to be a very large expense when we're partial to. So I'm interested in other people's thoughts on that as far as attending it, either virtually or in person.
And if I can add to that before the other thoughts, and that is that I did that before I was first on Tri-State, and I found it very, very valuable. I think it's really important for everybody to see what actually happens at Tri-State, the amount of work that goes into it and the different things. I know we used to do as an orientation of new directors, we would send them to Tri-State. And that kind of got put on the back burner because of COVID. But now with a lot of the meetings, we're still doing them hybrid. So you can attend them via phone, which will keep your expenses down. And what I'd suggest is if you do have interest, what happens is on Monday afternoon or the first day, they have the executive committee that goes for 2 hours or 3 hours. Then the next day are the actual committee meetings, and that it starts off with the O&A committee, then the external affairs, and then goes to the finance committee. And then the third day is the board meeting. And if you only have a little bit of time, I would go to that second day to those committee meetings. That's really where the meat is on the bone. That's where a lot of the presentations are done and the discussion really gets big and involved. The board meeting is more of a recap. You don't get to see the presentations again, and you are invited to those. You won't be invited to the executive sessions for the most part. Now, like finance last week, I know the CEOs that were there were still allowed to end on the executive thing, and I think Carl might have been too. I can't remember. Carl, you weren't? Okay.
No.
So sometimes you're in there, and sometimes, like the finance committee, certain executive sessions that they have, even other directors can't go, like myself. So anyway, there's a thought for you. If you can spend a day and do those committee meetings via phone, and when we do them virtual, it's phone, it's not Zoom. There is no video attached, and you'd think that's kind of weird, but I actually really like it. It works out really, really well. They have a good system. So I guess, Rachel, you're up.
I got sucked in the long range forecast. Some interesting things in there. What did,
Lots of
CC gas, carbon capture gas unit. This has financing in it for the carbon capture gas unit in 2030. Is that what CC gas unit means?
CC is a combined cycle.
Oh,
gas unit.
Okay. Disregard. And then I guess my other question really was in your report, with the cost savings, where were those coming from? Kind of, they dropped their budget for next year.
Well, what they're hoping for is that they can get some improvements on some of their steam generation units. They're also getting quite a bit of better pricing as far as their PPAs with their renewables that they've got online. And one of the big pushes is that hopefully we get our member sales back up. It's been a pretty ugly year this year. And as we saw from our reports this morning, LPEA was down on residential as well as commercial. And with Tri-State, it's all in one bucket. So it's been down. It's been pretty ugly. So hopefully that'll help as far as generate more cash and get some more savings. Okay. Holly?
Great, thanks, Cole. I remembered what it was. Okay, so at the Innovations Summit for CREA, I got an opportunity to see Reg Rudolph speak about the Empower program over at San Isabel and how well, his presentation was just really inspiring and super exciting. And I read that now he is going to take a new position doing that kind of work for Tri-State. So I want to say kudos on that. I'm really hoping that it's a fabulous move. And I'm looking forward to great things coming out of that.
And I'll tell you that staff is very excited about it as well. Dwayne can't hold himself back about it. And it's also an opportunity for additional revenues. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to happen, but we'll have a presentation on that next month. And I think, if I have this right, he starts in February, if I'm correct on that.
It's interesting that you say that, Kohler, because back in June 1st of 2020, the piece of the ERP that Tri-State filed with the PUC, actually, it was interesting because the only piece that was publicly available of that whole report was the executive piece, but then they also talked about Tri-State, specifically their assets and their performance. Those were like attachment A and attachment B, and they were completely redacted. The third attachment was a report that was done regarding about the good that Tri-State could accomplish if they could promote beneficial electrification measures. And it was interesting to me because they kept talking about kind of how it's like herding 42 cats in a herd, the whole dependency on how well this outcome of this programming would be clearly dependent upon the inputs that were put into it in the first place. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to see if Mr. Rudolph can translate the stuff that has gone on well at Empower over to Tri-State, because there is, in my opinion, massive benefits to be realized in that realm. Thank you, sir.
And I think Tri-State would agree with you on that. And I'd have to ask Jessica, but I think they just completed a survey on beneficial electrification for the members. Is that correct, Jessica? It's completed now?
Yeah, and I think Hillary, that was part of the survey that we're still getting the information back that we'll report on, hopefully January, February. Yeah.
Hopefully. I still haven't, I received the notification that they finished the survey, and so they selected our members who won for participating, but I haven't seen the data yet.
Okay, looks like that's it. I would like to thank everybody for allowing me to serve on that board. It means a lot to me. It's a lot of work, but I'm not complaining. I enjoy the challenge. So thank you.
Good. Thanks, Kohler. It's awesome. We appreciate the hard work. I'm glad you enjoy it. All right. Fast track.
Thanks. So reports in there. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them. But I'll give a little bit of some background on a couple things here. First, the Fast Track has still had difficulty trying to fulfill an in-house accounting position. And LPEA has helped. Carl's department has helped quite a bit, and has even offered some additional help that may be taken up as a backup if Kelly can't find the in-house accountant that she's looking for. So I want to extend my thanks to Carl, Jessica, and the staff who've been helping over there. It's been pretty critical help, and I appreciate it, as do all the people, I think, at Fast Track. As we've seen in the report before, Brainstorm, which is a local ISP here in Durango area, its parent company, Futurum, which is out of Denver, went into bankruptcy earlier this year, filed for bankruptcy, and that put payments that Brainstorm makes to Fast Track for middle mile services, those payments in arrears. And so there's some outstanding bills that have kept our Fast Track's interest in what's happening with this bankruptcy. And in December here, or maybe right at the end of November, the bankruptcy judge accepted an offer from a company called Denver VoIP, which was formed specifically to buy out the assets of Futurum, which includes Brainstorm. And the bankruptcy judge accepted that. I think it will close here in a week or so. 22nd, I believe, is expected to close. At which time Fast Track would be made whole in the payments, the arrears payments. So that's good news. Should that go forward? We also spent some time discussing kind of a review of the strategic plan that we adopted back in the fall of 2019. Obviously, the whole pandemic thing kind of put a lot of sort of far-reaching, forward-thinking goals around the strategic plan a bit on hold. but we reviewed a little bit of that again, and kind of recommitted to those, which are essentially remain a strong middle mile provider, go fiber to the premise for businesses, but not necessarily residential. And to the extent that the adoption of the strategic goal by LPEA is also one in which partnerships are sought. There's kind of a renewed emphasis on that within Fast Track, especially when it comes to finishing that last mile, right? So to me, that isn't a big change at all in where we had set our goals in 2019. There are a couple of projects that have allowed Fast Track to dip its toe a little bit into fiber to the home, but that is really not the direction, and it was somewhat reinforced at this point. What else? There was, after getting the opinion of the board last month about when Fast Track's annual meeting should be, and my recollection was leave it in April. The board decided that because they just had one in October or so, that they would do it again in October of 2022. So that is within the purview of Fast Track to change that with the agreement of the shareholders. So that will come at some point to LPEA and Empire shareholders for that approval. Yeah, I think that about covers the highlights. So if there's any questions, feel free to throw them my way.
Tim, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to follow up on your point that they have found an accountant and made an offer that was accepted yesterday.
Excellent. And I appreciate that. I didn't know that. You got better info than me, and I think you might have helped in the background with that as well. So thanks.
Yes, we did. But
Carl
thank you.
and Jessica. That's the kind of thing that I think is really important. You know, how we work with this majority-owned subsidiary there's a lot of opportunity there. So I hope we continue to do these kinds of things, and I appreciate it. Anyone else? Questions? All right. I must have done a good job. Thanks.
Okay, CREA.
All right, everybody. Well, you have my report in the board packet. It was quite an interesting meeting. I must say it was a joint managers CEO board meeting on Thursday we had a great speaker, but it was like 5.5, 6 hours of strategizing and discussing interesting stuff. Let me see here. So I have to begin by apologizing to you all, because there are times I know you ask relatively what should be simple questions and you end up getting white papers. And I have to apologize for that, but that's just how I think. And, you know, what I've come to realize is that is the diversity that is me. So the process of understanding how the Rural Electric Association works, it has been quite a journey. And when I started, a couple of you came to me and said, look, this has a steep learning curve. It's going to take some time to really even feel like you've got somewhat of a grip on it, but it's an industry that's under real evolution right now. And so my understanding of this has evolved right along with it. And so basically at the strategy session, Kurt Singer had emailed us saying that he wanted everybody to participate in this important piece. And I mentioned it last month because I had really thought about it, and I thought about asking about microgrids, you know, because, you know, that's something that I need to know about for the future, you know, and so on and so forth. But it really wasn't what was on my mind. And what was really on my mind, I've sent you bits and pieces of it, and I know it's complicated, and I'm sorry it's complicated, but I have come to the realization that we are facing a massive risk to the cooperative business model because we do not have the diversity on our boards of directors of thought and understanding that we require in order to meet the risks and the evolutions that are going to transpire in this industry. And so it took me a lot to get here, and it took me a lot. I really thought hard about how to deliver this message, you know, as as concisely and as coherently as I could to this group of people. And so right before the meeting started, they said, well, you don't have quite enough time to do it. You can do it maybe tomorrow, but you know, I really wanted to do it that day. I practiced it, right? And so, okay. So the meeting goes on, and the speaker was fabulous. His title was Leading Transformation, Turning Challenge into Opportunity and Change into Member Value. And honestly, I kept going, man, what I need to say is dovetailing into what he's saying so well, you know, and it just kept blowing up in my mind. Well, we got to the end of that, and we went on and we had these discussions, and I kept thinking, how could I get some of my points in, you know, to this discussion, because I can still see how what I have to say would so help these people. It's just ridiculous, but how do I put it in there? And I am not graceful. That is not my strength as a person. I'm not graceful. So I got some of my points in. I basically told him that I believe that we do have a massive risk if we don't, you know, address it. And even since then, I have come to an even greater understanding. And that's part of my challenge, is it's still an evolving understanding. And so I just sent you a paper that was written and published in 1991 by a guy named Victor Palmieri. And he was a trustee and an ex-CEO at Colorado Ute, which was our GNT predecessor to Tri-State for LPEA and a ton of people of cooperatives in Colorado, okay? And so I was gonna try to get sophisticated and screen share and all that crap, but I'm just basically, Drew, I did send it to you. Is there any way, sir, that you could bring that paper up, please, for me? I'm sorry to, yeah, thank you. I'm sorry to do this, but I think it's really super important, because he was talking about, I've given this paper to this board several times because I think I knew intuitively that it was really important, okay? And in the past, I remember very clearly the last time I asked the board about it, it was Britt Bassett. He says, he went on about the economics and about the numbers part of it. And, you know, it recurred to me afterwards that what is missing is looking at it from the social perspective, from the social sciences perspective. And so Drew even said earlier on our cyber security thing that social engineering is our greatest danger in cybersecurity. And I think what we've got going on is the same thing here. And so basically, did you find it, Drew?
Yep, I'm getting it right now.
Oh, thank you, sir. In this paper, Mr. Palmieri, who, by the way, he's 91 years old, he lives in California. He's like the self-described guru of corporate, I'm not sure, helpfulness or, you know, setting corporate straight. I wrote to him and I said, you know, I found this paper really instrumental. Okay. And you can see it was written and published in 91, 92, but right in the middle of it, it talks about, and this isn't exactly our situation here, but this applies in my opinion, for 30 years. And you can see prior to 1989, Colorado Ute was led by two strong-willed managers. Tremendous trust was placed in both of these men by the members in the board of directors. Under their management, Colorado Ute proved to be a very reliable supplier of electricity and leader in the electric industry. This success naturally reinforced their esteem among the members and directors, but it led, unfortunately, to a strong manager, weak board corporate culture, okay? This is often the pattern, and this is why we have to do something, in my opinion, on this, and this is why I stood up and said something. Whether the case involves a corporate structure or a large public corporation, no matter how experienced and tough-minded the members may be as individuals, something strange happens when they get together in a group. I call it collective incompetence, and it is not limited to business organizations. I've seen the same thing happen in crisis management situations in government. And so when I read that and I think about all my hypothesis on how we have a massive risk looming because we have these homogenous boards of directors across the rural electric cooperative landscape that are not seeing the risks that are coming down the pipeline. I just have to figure out how to make this a cohesive message that can get through. And that's why I'm talking to you guys today, because I have to start with you. And, you know, we have a very, very diverse board compared to a lot of boards. And, you know, I've got a lot of different thoughts and obviously emotions on this, but anyhow, I had found out very quickly who my supporters were. You can go ahead and put it down if you like, Drew. I just had to show that to you. Please take a chance and an opportunity to read that paper if you get a chance, because I do think it's pertinent to today. I found out who the supporters were on this. I found out who was scratching their brains like, what the hell is she talking about? Maybe some of you are right now. And I found out very clearly who had no idea what I was talking about and really didn't care to. So that was interesting. I did learn a lot just in, you know, that little aspect. And for me, quite honestly, it was a big deal. And I survived. So
I'm sure that was a tough crowd for you, Holly. I'm sure it
well,
was.
I could tell you some hair-raising stories. I can tell you, you know, really just interesting perspectives. And I try to take it all in because what we have to realize is that we're all in the same boat together and we have to figure out how to work together. But if we don't have a diversity of thought on these boards to understand what the risks are, we're screwed, you know, and it's already manifesting itself. It's manifesting itself in things like activist groups. Right? I had another director send me, the Sierra Club has got a massive campaign in Holy Cross territory to try to get those guys to weigh in on the PUC electricity resource interview for Excel that's going on right now. You know, activist groups, because they're like, you know, the world's burning down, we got to do something, right? But it also leads to things like stranded assets. It leads to things like, you know, not dealing with climate change. It leads to, you know, a wide variety of really big risks that are already manifesting themselves, and they're just going to get worse until we do something different.
Right. And you know, that groupthink is a very dangerous thing. You know, Holly, you and Bob and I came up against this when we were trying to figure out something as easy as the Roundup rep, because what we talked about is that need for diversity on that board. And interestingly, on that board, it's not a white male problem, it's a white female problem. And so, you know, really looking for, well, who are the right candidates? Because that's where we have that's where we have the power. We can't, it's hard, you know, it's the voters who vote us in. So trying to find candidates and pursuing folks who from diverse backgrounds is helpful, but it's still up to the voters in the long run. But there are those places where we can appoint somebody. And in this case, the Roundup board, when we appointed Mr. Martinez, I think that really helped. So there are some places that this can be helpful, but it's an uphill battle, Holly. So stick with it, girl. Okay.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I was just gonna applaud you for being brave. Sounds like that was a pretty wild experience, and especially when you're still digesting and coming up kind of with how to present something. And there's some, just going back to, you know, where you're operating in a human space, there's some really interesting theory out there about how to present concepts like these that can evoke fear or defensiveness. And so kind of just how to go about doing it in a way that doesn't unintentionally, because of human psychology, push people in the corner. So maybe we can talk offline and be happy to share.
Hey, I really appreciate any help I can get, because like I said, I had to practice to really feel like I was going to be like cohesive, and I'm sure I wasn't very cohesive, but at least I got my point out there. So. All right, and other CREA news. Let's see. I did receive from Tim Coleman a legislative update that I have not read, and so therefore have not forwarded to you. I would recommend reading those, or at least looking through those CRA news clips that I sent you. There is some great stuff in that. Really exciting things going on. Let's see. CRA has really worked hard to develop a messaging campaign that has 3 bullet points. I really agreed with them, but there was a lot of discussion on whether they should include the word decarbonization in one of them. That was one of our strategy. So, you know, I think that we'll see that rolling out here soon. They're going to be talking to Hillary. They'll be reaching out to you on this if they haven't already. I really wanted to just mention again that speaker that they had. He was excellent. And that was one of the things, you know, I love one-liners and quotes. One of the things that I forgot to put in there was he, and see, I already forgot it because I'm all emotionally charged, sorry. Oh, he said, don't say that you didn't see it coming several times. So that's one of the things that he was talking about in leading transformation is don't say that you didn't see it coming. So, you know, that's why I forwarded that Colorado failure paper on to the CRA board, because I want them to at least have that in their arsenal. Let's see. Anyway, I think at this point, I can't give you anything else exciting that's going to just bounce off my brain. So do you have any other questions? Let's go with that. You're in the partially in the black hole. Kirsten, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. It's about the discussion on the business model dependent upon kilowatt hour sales and alternatives to that. And it's a big thing. And it's something that we at a distribution level need to be thinking of really seriously, not just our G&T. And I know that I think you had said that it didn't sound like anybody came up with any solutions, but are there any ideas jiggling around? And this is for anybody on the LPEA board also, wondering what ideas people are thinking about, because it's a big issue. How do we deal with this? How do we become a service provider instead of a kilowatt hour provider?
Yes, and you're right. That is a really big discussion. And that question really was tossed around quite a bit. It went a lot around the CEOs, and it was much higher level than some of my understanding. I found myself a lot going, okay, what was that? What was that? You know, to tell you the honest truth. And also I was going, hey, I need to talk about that in my speech. So unfortunately, I cannot tell a lie. My bad. I was a little bit divided on that. But you know what? And that's one of the things I'm hoping that Reg Rudolph can really help us with is herding the 42 cats, right? Or whatever, to be able to implement our beneficial electrification and start selling more, you know, kilowatt hours. That's one of my personal takes on that.
Hey, Jessica, this might be a little sudden notice, but do you recall any ideas that came up around that different business model for other than kilowatt hour sales?
Yeah, Kirsten, that's a good question. I can't recall.
Right.
Well, I'll have to talk with Dan. He may be working on the outage, but we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, super, thanks.
All right, Bob.
Yeah, Holly, thank you. And, you know, in saying that, I appreciate your passionate appeal to that audience. And I think in some ways, and I don't want to put Kohler on the spot at all, but I think when Kohler spoke earlier about change being hard and the coal industry and how much that's going to hurt communities when that moves along and stuff, pitting that against that feeling that many people have against what you're talking about is kind of the crux of the issue, that there is a legacy way that we did things that has a lot of wonderful history to it, and people's lives are built around it and everything else that is very hard to let go of. But I think more and more people, and I think hopefully it's not too late, because more and more people are coming to the realization that we're getting close to a point of no return on the whole climate thing, that it's not just, gee, isn't it nice? You know, friends of mine that I grew up with say, you know, it probably is a good idea that we probably start to transition from some of that. You know, they're just barely agreeing that change might be okay. And I think change is happening way too slow. And so I appreciate having someone passionate like you that argues that case. And I understand totally where Kohler, where you're coming from, and I don't hope you don't take that as any kind of shot or anything. I think you're a very honest representative of that point of view. And at the same time, there are those of us on the side of the coin that say, by the time everybody wakes up, they're going to say, holy crap, as you said, Holly, holy crap, why didn't we do more sooner? And so I appreciate you pounding that gavel and putting yourself out there and stretching yourself personally and making a case for those things I believe in too. So thank you.
Well, and I really appreciate that viewpoint, Bob. That's why I really practiced. And I was calm, cool, and collected there and not near as emotional. So take that as, you know, that was good on my end. And so
Well,
I'm doing my best to
something-
represent.
I think there's something not to be apologetic about being raw emotionally, because that's when it's the most real. Because we've all practiced how to say things and make people believe those things. And sometimes that comes without a lot of emotion. But I wouldn't be at all ashamed, as it were, of letting that raw emotion show. Because that's a little bit of what's missing in all this business calculus. It's like, yeah, but don't you realize like cost could go up by half a penny per person per year for a lifetime? Yeah, well, don't you realize that this thing we built everything around on, this planet that we love, all these things, that's what's at stake. I feel strongly for every one of those coal jobs, but I feel stronger for the planet my kids are going to have to live on.
All right, Rachel.
Well, this is really practical and not impassioned. It was an example to Kirsten's point. Like, what could we do as a service provider? So I know you just got your Energy Star refrigerator. Well, I just got my heat pump water heater. And guess what? There's not a single person in this town who knows how to install it. You call these plumbers, they don't even know what it is. Like right now, I don't know how to program the thing and it's sucking energy left, right, and center. That if I could call LPEA, which I did, and they could tell me how to work this so it aligns with their rates, which they did, that to me is huge because I want to do the right thing. I want the cost savings. This thing can cool my house and our heating climate, all these things, but they're the only ones that know how to do it. So I don't know. That was just one instance. I was like, oh, this is somewhere we're going. And then I don't want to forget, we've talked about this a lot, like restructuring our rates so that they're like slowly moving towards like true cost as we break them apart. But yeah, it's an exciting conversation.
Okay. Last call for Holly. Tim, go ahead.
Holly, I really appreciate your passion as well. My question really isn't about that. It's a little more prosaic. I noticed in here two things. One, something about Project Tundra, and another about Polis just hired a new energy and climate advisor. Do you have any brief background on either of those things? And maybe the name of the advisor and what, did you hear anything about what was expected of this new position?
Unfortunately, no on the advisor, and I wrote down Project Tundra as something to go research myself. So I'm sorry, sir. I have no further information for you right now.
All
I
right.
will be happy to forward to you when I find it.
Great, great. Keep up the good work and keep that passion going, Holly. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Last minute. Okay.
Wait,
Pushing on.
there was one question. Oh, sorry. One
Yeah,
question.
no, please go ahead.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I just scroll down to see my highlight there. The annual CRE annual meeting, that's going to be in person in Denver again or something? I mean,
It's slated to be in person in Denver, yes.
and who knows about registration for that? In the past, before the pandemic, Karis would always remind us of that and so forth and help. So is that something we do through Janelle or?
I'll find out on that. I'm making a little list right now of the things to ask for you. Project Tundra. They do have a couple of class offerings coming up that I just got a list of, so I'll get all that to you guys as well, so you can kind of start planning for that.
That's in the middle of the cow that we were going to have on.
Yeah, I want to say it's the 12th and the 13th of February.
So it's
I'd have to
12th and
look.
15th.
That's the dates that are coming right now off the top of my head. So I'm looking at my calendar to see if I have that much foresight to put it in there.
So it might be worth us figuring out who is planning together and who might be.
It's the
not
14th
available.
and 15th. Oh boy, wait. I don't know when it is. I'm gonna have to check on that. Sorry.
So I'm just pointing out to John and Jessica, perhaps, that if we have a cow then and people want to go to that as well, there's a conflict. So we might want to think about that.
Yeah, Tim, we looked at that and I think we felt that really we need to get to a decision on the BDP. So having the cow was more important on the 14th.
Thanks. It's my birthday, man. So if we
Okay.
have, we should have
You're a sweetheart.
We're gonna save the world with green energy on Tim's birthday. So okay, let's move on here. Western United, please.
A new meeting this month.
No meeting this month. Okay, well, that completes the December board meeting and completes the board meetings for 2021. Kirsten.
It's Holly's birthday today. Happy,
And-
happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Love her.
Happy birthday.
Hey, thanks everybody. Appreciate that.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, just tomorrow, I'm a little confused about tomorrow. So the ride along with the media starts at 11 and our ride along starts at 1.
Yes, so let me just go through kind of what the agenda for the day is.
Thank you.
If you're interested in sorry, my dogs know when I'm gonna start talking and they start barking. So if you're interested in attending all of the events tomorrow, just be at the Durango 9R bus barn. And I believe you have the address to that, but it's kind of over by the Armadillo storage. Be there at 11 a.m. We're gonna start promptly at 11 a.m. So maybe come just a bit before. There'll be speeches by Karen Cheeser and then also Jessica. And then Dominic from our team will be doing a demo of how the bidirectional charging on the bus works. We'll have a brief Q&A with any media there, and then we'll load the bus and go on a little drive. We'll have Q&A on the bus as well with Dan, and then we'll come back to the bus barn and wrap things up. We should be done by noon at the latest, no later than noon. Then you would have a free hour in which to go grab lunch, do whatever you would like. And then we will meet in the LPEA parking lot at 1 to load on the e-bus and drive to the substation for the substation tour. Does that make sense?
Great. Kirsten.
Yeah, is the substations tour still going to be on if we're having a lot of outages and a lot of folks running around?
I confirmed with 9R today. They had to cancel a bunch of their events today. FLC also had some sort of a threat and had to lock down their campus. A lot of events were canceled, and so people just want to move ahead with it. It took a long time to get this on our calendar, so we're just going to go ahead and proceed. We know quite a few of the media outlets are planning to come, so we're gonna push ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. I'm asking about the substation piece of it because that's the one I'm more interested in. So that's the second part that starts at 1, and I don't want to risk the roads coming over if we say, oh, you know what, this isn't a good time to get into this substation because there's all this bloody ice everywhere. Guys, any answers on that?
Yeah, Jerry and I talked about that a bit yesterday. We were sort of playing things by ear to see how today unfolded. Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like things are under control at this point, and we're going on as anticipated. But if the roads are icy, we can catch up with you another time, Kirsten. So don't risk life and limb to get here.
Yeah, well, I won't be risking my from him, but so I'm not gonna come over, so you guys can take my seat and don't have to get me my hazardous gear to go into the substation, because I ain't coming, thanks.
Rachel?
Super quick logistics. Is there any briefing or anything happening at LPA before you drive to the substation? I'm just like squeezing in between meetings, and so it might be quicker for me to just meet you at the trailhead.
I think that'd be perfectly fine, Rachel.
Okay, I'll send a follow-up email with
yeah.
confirmation. Thank you.
Okay, last closing thoughts for 2021. Tim, go ahead.
I just wanted to repeat some kudos that I got from some members here the last couple of weeks. I can't recall exactly which member it was right now, but they had an issue. They called up customer service, somehow got connected with Hillary there. And they just gave me a glowing report of how enjoyable the experience was and how that person was gratified. So just want to pass that on. Also, I have a friend who apparently had a few years ago, LPEA said something was growing around one of their pedestals or something, and they came back to do the work on it recently. And this person asked them not to cut everything out away from this bush or something, or tree or something. And again, this person was saying that the care and the sort of attention to the request of the homeowner was extraordinary. And so I want to pass that on, because members felt really, really empowered and good about their experience with LPEA staff. So good job to all of you, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Tim. It's always nice to hear kudos and appreciation. So thank you.
Last thoughts?
Oh, Hillary, so there'll be plenty of room for us on the bus if we come at 11, right? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank you guys for a great year. It's been terrific working with everybody, and special thanks to the staff. You guys have had a hell of a year, and it's impressive to see the success that you guys have achieved thus far, and I think you're going to have an even more impressive 2022. So thank you again, both to the board and to the staff. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you guys next year.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.